Chapter 1546. After sending Wuxia away, a horn sounded from the headquarters. Everyone froze. Then the ground shook. However, the sound of the horn soon stopped. What's going on? West looked at the headquarters in shock. The people in the headquarters ran out too. Everyone thought it was an earthquake. A while later, Helis walked out with the death horn in her hand. Her hair was covered in dust. Chen Zhao had given her the death horn. Hallease, what happened? West immediately ran forward to ask. I tried to use the death horn that the president gave me to wake up the demon, Helis said, a bit embarrassed. Then, the abyss demon woke up and couldn't control it, so it destroyed the third floor of the basement. It doesn't matter if the basement is destroyed, as long as the people are fine. West was famous for being stingy. He had to be calculative when applying for funding for the members, but he was generous now. It was mainly because of Wuxia's warmth. As long as he succeeded, he would have funding for the next 10 years. Is it under control now? West asked. This mission wasn't easy. If Chen Zhao didn't get involved, it would be difficult for the members. Even West didn't dare to say that he could definitely complete it. So, it was better for the members to be as strong as possible. I put the demon's corpse back to sleep. I can't control it completely. Helis shook her head. It still has some memories from when it was alive. Then keep working hard, West said. If you have any requests, just tell me. President, that's about it. West told Chen Zhao about Wuxia's mission. There was no need to hide it from Chen Zhao. One reason was that he couldn't hide it. Moreover, Chen Zhao could also step in and help when necessary. Chen Zhao didn't mind that West had stolen his business. The $200 million mission wasn't a small amount. The association didn't have enough funding right now. If they could get $200 million, the association would have enough funds for the next few years. To be honest, if Wuxia came to find Chen Zhao, he might not get involved. Chen Zhao didn't like Wuxia. He still remembered how she'd tricked him last time. However, she'd asked the supernatural organization, so Chen Zhao didn't mind helping. Yes, Chen Zhao thought for a moment. West, don't you think that $200 million for 3 missions isn't her bottom line? West raised his eyebrows. President, what do you mean? I heard Wuxia talk about the Hunters Guild before. In the 200 to 300 years since its establishment, it's said that the legendary Van Helsing was from the Hunters Guild. After hundreds of years of accumulation, who knows how much wealth and foundation they have accumulated? $200 million should be a drop in the bucket for them. Try it. Just say that I'm very dissatisfied with this price and my attitude is very dissatisfied. See if you can raise the price. President, aren't you friends with Miss Wuxia? Friend? Not really. We just know each other, Chen Zhao said calmly. Chen Zhao would never admit that Wuxia was his friend. Alright, I understand. Hearing that Chen Zhao and Wuxia were not friends, and that Chen Zhao sounded disgusted, West immediately understood. West had accepted it so easily because he thought that Chen Zhao and Wuxia were friends. With Chen Zhao's personality, if they were friends, Chen Zhao definitely wouldn't be calculative with them. Therefore, West didn't even try to bargain and agreed to Wuxia's request. Now that Chen Zhao had tacitly agreed, West didn't have to be polite anymore. President, you better come to the association tomorrow. Helis' refining of the Abyss Demon has reached a critical stage. I heard that the last stage needs to erase the demon's memory fragments. This needs to awaken the demon, but the awakened demon can't be controlled. It's best if you can be there and help Helis control the situation. Sure, I'll go at noon tomorrow. Back then, Helis had said that it would take at least a year to completely refine and control the demon. But because Chen Zhao had given Death Horn to Helis, it seemed like the progress was much faster. The next day, Chen Zhao arrived at the headquarters. As soon as he got out, Max, who was in charge of the parking lot, floated over. Chen Zhao was stunned to see Ghost Max. President, what's wrong? Were you injured recently? Chen Zhao asked. Chen Zhao looked at Max. There seemed to be a crack on his body. The crack was obvious in Chen Zhao's eyes. It could even be considered a serious injury, but Max didn't seem to feel it. Last time, when I went out to drink with the Dews, we met a spiritualist. He hit me with magic. Luckily, a Dews stopped him and explained, Max said. I've indeed been feeling uncomfortable these days. I can't gather the aura of death. Stand there and don't move. I'll take a look for you. Max didn't doubt Chen Zhao. After all, Chen Zhao was the supernatural organization's nuclear weapon. There was no use worrying. If Chen Zhao wanted to hurt him, one slap would be enough. Chen Zhao pulled Max's arm and sent his immortal power into Max's body. In an instant, Max let out a moan of pleasure. Chen Zhao saw that his immortal power was repairing the crack on Max's body. It seeped into the crack like glue. Then the crack disappeared. Chen Zhao didn't expect his immortal power to be so effective at repairing the spirit body. Moreover, he seemed to be able to see the damage of the spirit body. He didn't have this ability in the past. Was this the so-called divine power? Chen Zhao wasn't sure. It was a unique divine power. Or could it be that everyone who possessed celestial power had this ability? Hey, President, my spirit body is complete. My spirit body is very complete, Max exclaimed in surprise. Complete? Chen Zhao was stunned. After death, people would either fall into hell or stay in the human world. However, most spirit bodies that stayed in the human world would turn into evil spirits. This transformation process was quite damaging to the spirit body. Many spirit bodies would only be left with negative emotions. Their rationality and intelligence would all disappear. Most spirit bodies in the organization were powerful. At least they had intelligence, but they had flaws in their emotions too. But didn't Chen Zhao just repair the damage to his spirit body? Chen Zhao was confused. Did he just repair all the damage to his spirit body? Please remember the original domain name of this book. 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1547. Chen Zhao entered the association. Helis had been waiting for a long time. President, Chen Zhao nodded. The demon's corpse is still in the basement, right? I haven't controlled it yet, Helis said. I can't send it into the death dimension. Then I'll go down and bring it up. Let's go to the empty space. Chen Zhao went down to the 3rd floor and was about to put the demon's corpse into his spatial ring. Suddenly he saw the demon's soul. It was very broken. Chen Zhao rubbed his chin and looked at the soul fragments. 10 minutes later, Helis came down. She'd been waiting for Chen Zhao upstairs. But after 10 minutes, Chen Zhao still didn't go up. President, what's wrong? Can you extract the demon's soul? Chen Zhao asked. I can't. I can only erase its soul. You can ask Lady Pamela about it. Chen Zhao called Pamela over. Pamela, I want the demon's soul. Can you extract it? No problem, Pamela asked. But President, the demon's soul is all fragments. What do you want it for? I've been studying soul magic recently, Chen Zhao said. I need some souls for research. I understand. Pamela didn't ask further. Chen Zhao asked Ruan Faxi for a few soul containers and took out all the demon's soul fragments. If the abyss demon was still alive, Pamela wouldn't have been able to extract its soul so easily. She might not even be able to defeat it. However, the abyssal demons had already been dead for almost a year. Apart from some instinctive consciousness, it had almost lost all its self-awareness. So Pamela didn't have to spend much effort to pull out all the soul fragments. Then it was time for Helis. Chen Zhao sent the demon's corpse to the empty space. Although the demon's soul fragments were all empty, it still had instinctive consciousness. As soon as Helis awakened the demon, it immediately attacked everyone around it. It was even more violent than when it was conscious. Chen Zhao picked up the chain he'd prepared. Apart from Chen Zhao, no one else could use it. It was a ship's anchor chain. Each link weighed hundreds of kilograms and was 100 meters long. But in Chen Zhao's hands, the chain was still a bit light. Chen Zhao spun the chain in his hand twice and then threw it out. The chain wrapped around the abyss demon's neck, after which Chen Zhao held it tightly. The abyssal demon frantically struggled. Right now, it was just a moving corpse without any consciousness. Chen Zhao pulled the demon to the ground. Looking at Chen Zhao, Gaia walked up and said, Chen, let me try and see if I can pull it down. Chen Zhao loosened the chains, and the demon immediately climbed up. Gaia quickly caught the chain, but then she was thrown away by the abyssal fiend's immense strength. Gaia still did not let go of the chains. He transformed into a fire dragon the moment he was flung away. However, in terms of size, Gaia was still much smaller than the abyssal fiends. Although the abyssal fiend demon was only left with a shell, its fleshly body was still terrifyingly strong. The others took the initiative to step back and watch Gaia and the abyssal evil demon wrestle. The abyssal fiend's strength was not at its peak, but it was impossible for Gaia to kill it. The value of the corpse was in its completeness. If Gaia burned it with fire, Helis would probably turn against her. After all, Helis had spent 7 to 8 months refining the abyssal fiend. Now that it was almost done, Gaia could only try. However, in terms of strength, Gaia was still weaker than the abyssal fiend in the fire dragon form. Gaia bit the chain and quickly circled around the abyssal fiend. In the end, the abyssal fiend was tied up like a rice dumpling and fell to the ground. Whoosh! Gaia returned to human form. "Gaia, you're so strong," Helis said. Gaia smiled bitterly. Strong? She was just bullying the abyssal fiend for its lack of intelligence. If the abyssal fiend was controlled by Helis, its combat ability would definitely soar. Moreover, she could not completely suppress it like Chen Zhao. Helis climbed onto the abyssal fiend's head using the ladder, and then drew magic patterns with fluorescent powder. Fluorescent powder was a type of magic powder, similar to magical phosphorus. However, fluorescent powder was made from the skeletons of the dead. Only necromancers would use fluorescent powder. Then a green magic pattern was imprinted on the abyssal fiend's head. The process was rather complicated. Chen Zhao could not understand it at all. Only Ruan Faxi could instinctively understand it. After completing the magic vein patterns, Helis stood on the chest of the abyssal demon and chanted an obscure magic incantation. Chen Zhao and Gaia stood on either side and pulled the two ends of the chain so that the abyssal fiend could not move. Gradually, the abyssal fiend calmed down. Its eyes had turned from pure black to a ghostly green. After completing the incantation, Helith let out a long sigh. "President Gaia, let go. I'll try and see if it works." Chen Zhao and Gaia let go. The abyssal fiend was still lying on the ground. Looking at the huge body before her, Helis yelled, "Get up!" The abyssal fiend stood up clumsily. Its eyes flickered with a dark light. "Kneel and reach out your hand." The abyssal fiend knelt before Helis and opened its hand. Helis stood on the abyssal fiend's huge palm. Chen Zhao and Gaia also became vigilant. If the abyssal fiend made any strange movements, they would act immediately. Thankfully, their worries were unnecessary. The abyssal fiend did not do anything to threaten Helis. After that, Helis gave a few more complicated orders. Actually, Helis did not need to say her orders to the abyssal fiend. After confirming that Helis could completely control the abyssal fiend's corpse, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The abyssal fiend was more than 30 meters tall. Even though it only had physical attacks, it still possessed unparalleled destructive and offensive power. Helis hoped to equip the abyssal fiend with a pair of weapons suitable for its size. Zhengqura and Dongye Tianqi immediately started arguing again. They both felt that they could design and create weapons suitable for the abyssal fiend. Dongye Tianqi's plan was to design a huge samurai sword, while Zhengqura felt that a pair of dual swords was more suitable for the abyssal fiend. As for how to choose, it would depend on Helis' choice. Gaia was the person with the most experience in using weapons in the association. She felt that both weapons had their own advantages. She felt that both weapons could be chosen and equipped. Chapter 1548. West, do you understand this? Chen Zhao took out the magic scroll he'd gotten from Blood Mary the other day. What language is this? I don't understand it. West shook his head. Maybe Alice can. Ask her. The most knowledgeable person in the association was Alice. After all, her bloodline contained half of the Witch Society's magic library. A while later, Alice was called to Chen Zhao. Alice, do you understand this magic scroll? Is this ancient Greek? It's my first time seeing it. Alice looked at the magic scroll in shock. If it's your first time seeing it, how do you know it's ancient Greek? Chen Zhao was even more confused. I've read some ancient books that explain the rules of ancient Greek, Alice said. Then can you translate it? Alice shook her head. No one can translate it. Ancient Greek has long been lost. Some archaeologists now should have some understanding of ancient Greek, but most of their research is based on guesses or inferences from modern Greek phrases. But President, I'm afraid only people of that era can understand the ancient Greek on the scroll. Alice shook her head. Chen Zhao believed that there were definitely people in the world who could translate it. For example, Blood Mary the 23rd who'd given him the magic scroll. However, the bet between them was only about the ownership of the spell. If he went to find her, she'd probably make some requests. Chen Zhao didn't want to beg her. Oh, Alice, do you have any books on the soul? Yes. President, are you going to change to soul magic? I'm suddenly interested. If you do, organize a set for me. I want all the books on the soul, even the basics. Alice slowly closed her palms. A ball of green magic appeared between her palms. The magic spun and sparks flew. Gradually, a brand new magic book appeared in Alice's hands. President, this is the most comprehensive book on the basics of soul magic, Alice said. Tell me when you're done. Chen Zhao accepted the magic book. It looked like it was only a few hundred pages long. So little? Are you sure it's the most comprehensive foundation of soul magic? Guild leader, soul magic is even rarer than necromancy magic. Since ancient times, there hasn't been a single person proficient in soul magic. Hence, very few people research soul magic. As far as I know, there are only a dozen or so books on soul magic. Hearing this, Chen Zhao could not help but feel dazed. A dozen magic books? That was indeed very rare. Compared to other types of magic, it was thousands of times worse. For example, elemental magic, divination magic, voodoo magic, and so on. There were thousands or even tens of thousands of magic books. However, there were only a dozen or so books on soul magic. One could well imagine how rare soul magic was. When he returned home with the magic book, Fei Lai was doing yoga in the yard while reading the Book of Changes. When Fei Lai saw him, the first thing she said was a genteel ancient language. Dear, you're tainted with evil spirits and your glabella is black. Did you come into contact with something unclean recently? Fei Lai, can we speak human language? Chen Zhao didn't understand at all. A proper foreigner wanted to discuss metaphysics with him. Who could stand that? Answer me first. Did you come into contact with something unclean? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes in exasperation. What was so strange about that? He came into contact with unclean things every now and then. Today, he'd come into contact with an abyss demon's corpse. It should be considered unclean, right? Yes. Master, do you have a way to save me? Save my ass. Fei Lai rolled her eyes at Chen Zhao and spoke in pure English. Master, why aren't you saving me? Why are you scolding me? The evil spirits in your body have dispersed. They can't invade your body at all. Although your glabella is black, it's quite full. The sun and moon are bright. You're clearly impenetrable. I understand why my glabella is black, but where's the midriff? And where's the sun and moon? Chen Zhao had watched Hong Kong horror movies since he was young. Basically, all of them had a black glabella, so he naturally knew that it was the forehead. However, he really didn't know where the midriff was, or what the sun and moon represented. The midriff is the line from the middle of your eyebrows to the tip of your nose. The sun and moon are your left and right eyes, Fei Lai explained patiently. Unless it's plastic surgery, the midriff shouldn't change, right? No. The aura observation technique says that the face is like a mirror, and the heart is like the face. As the heart moves, the face changes. If the face changes, the fate can be seen. I don't understand. Chen Zhao shrugged helplessly. Are you even Chinese? Fei Lai was a foreigner, but she was criticizing Chen Zhao's bloodline so righteously. Chen Zhao was speechless. He really wanted to tell Fei Lai that even a proper Chinese wouldn't understand the metaphysics she was talking about. Chen Zhao wondered if he should change subjects for Fei Lai. Otherwise, Fei Lai would always learn Eastern metaphysics, and Chen Zhao would be very embarrassed. Should he ask Alice for a few Western prophecy books? To put it simply, the face is born from the heart. If the heart changes, the face will change. If the face changes, the fate will change. Whoosh, Chen Zhao exhaled. She finally spoke human words. Then why is the left and right eye called the sun and moon? The aura observation technique says that humans have yin and yang spirits. The yang spirit connects to qi, and the yin spirit connects to spells. For example, last time, I covered my right eye so I couldn't see Torin. I could see it with my left eye because the right eye can connect to yin qi. You can't say that, Chen Zhao argued. You can see Turin because its yin qi has turned into a physical form. If it were a normal spirit, you wouldn't be able to see it either. That's one reason, Chen Zhao argued. The other reason is that the entrances aren't opened. For spiritualists like you, the entrances of your left and right eyes are already open, so you can see spirits with both eyes. I'm a normal person, and my entrances aren't open, so I can't see spirits. Even if it's a materialized spirit like Turin, my left eye can only connect to qi and not spells, so it can't see the yin qi of a spirit. Fei Lai's explanation seemed to make some sense. Fei Lai, can you see my qi? Fei Lai thought about it and said, it's a special feeling. I don't see your qi, but your face. I know it's your qi. Chapter 1549. Chen Zhao really didn't know that Fei Lai had actually learned something by herself. After all, Chen Zhao's head hurt just from reading those ancient books. Chen Zhao also knew that Fei Lai had been learning Mandarin by herself when she was learning it. She would occasionally communicate with Chen Zhao, or ask him some questions in Chinese. But now, Chen Zhao didn't even dare to say that he could teach Fei Lai. Little Jerlin and Larissa were playing beside the dragon's head. It had become an important entertainment spot for the two girls. Chen Zhao also sat in the dragon's mouth. Leaning against a tooth, he crossed his legs and read the magic book in his hands. The soul was the most mysterious thing in the world. Even gods didn't dare to say that they completely understood the soul. Chen Zhao read the first two sentences that were deliberately mystifying. He continued reading. Compared to the West, the East had a much deeper understanding of the soul. Easterners divided the soul into 3 souls and 7 spirits. The 3 souls were fetal light, the second was refreshing spirit, the third was nether essence, and the 7 spirits were dead dog, hidden arrow, sparrow een, thief devouring, non-poison, defilement and smelly lung. The 7 spirits corresponded to joy, anger, sorrow, joy, fear, hate and desire. The 3 souls corresponded to wisdom, self and memory. The Western spiritual world believed that the soul was a whole, but reality proved that the soul did indeed have 3 souls and 7 spirits. After death, the soul that lingered in the human world would be damaged to a certain extent. According to research, these souls that lingered in the human world would have certain emotional or personality defects due to the damage to their spiritual bodies. Chen Zhao read the contents of the magic book. The contents of this book seemed to have been written by a foreigner who knew a lot about China. Many of the contents were quotes from China's classics or metaphysics. Chen Zhao realized that the author of the book wasn't just a metaphysical spiritualist. He also liked to verify things from a scientific perspective. The most interesting theory was that the author believed that after death, the fetal light that represented the self would be damaged first. When the fetal light was damaged, there would be a deviation in one's self-awareness. Other than representing self-awareness, the fetal light was also the outermost layer of protection for the soul. Then the refreshing spirit, which represented wisdom, and the nether essence, which represented memory, would also be damaged. The 3 souls were like onions. Once they were peeled off layer by layer, the 7 spirits mixed within would also start to dissipate. However, this process wouldn't last forever. In fact, it wouldn't last long. When the spirit body stabilized, the stronger spirit body would become an evil spirit. If the embryonic light was severely damaged, the spirit body would gradually evaporate like alcohol coming into contact with air. Chen Zhao found this theory interesting. It also mentioned that if the soul was completely shattered, the 7 spirits would dissipate like air. All the soul fragments would only be fragments of the 3 souls. Among them, the white light belonged to the embryo light, the blue light belonged to the refreshing spirit, and the green light belonged to the nether spirit. Chen Zhao took out the soul fragment he had extracted from the abyss demon. There were indeed white, blue, and green soul fragments in these soul containers. Chen Zhao looked at these soul fragments. If he used immortal power to forcefully repair them into a complete soul form, would each soul fragment become a complete and independent soul? Chen Zhao was a bit hesitant. It was like someone chopping off a person's hand and then cloning the person's arm. Give it a try. Chen Zhao picked up a blue soul fragment and poured it into his palm. Chen Zhao chose the blue soul fragment because it belonged to intelligence. It didn't have memories or a self. If Chen Zhao used a white or green soul fragment, the repaired soul would have the abyss demon's memories or a self. It would definitely know his past, so Chen Zhao chose the blue soul fragment. Chen Zhao started to send immortal power into the blue soul fragment. The blue soul fragment started to expand, becoming bigger and bigger, and bigger. However, Chen Zhao felt more and more pressure. No, he had to stop. Chen Zhao felt powerless. Chen Zhao didn't think it would be so difficult to repair one of the three souls. Repairing Max's soul had been very easy. Why was it so difficult now? Chen Zhao looked at the blue soul in his hand. It was half the size of a person now, and had the shape of the abyss demon. However, there were many gaps. As expected, repairing these soul fragments was almost a god's power. Chen Zhao didn't think he could continue. Moreover, the more complete it was, the more difficult it was. The moment Chen Zhao stopped, the blue soul quickly dissipated. Chen Zhao hurriedly sent the blue soul into the container. However, the dissipation didn't stop. It continued. What was going on? The blue soul dissipated until it was the size of the original soul fragment. Only then did it stabilize. Chen Zhao frowned. Was it because it didn't have the protection of fetal light? After recovering his immortal power, Chen Zhao tried again. This time, he needed a white soul fragment and a blue soul fragment together. Then he poured immortal power into it again. It was the same process as last time. Halfway through the repair, the soul had already formed. Chen Zhao's immortal power couldn't continue, so he could only stop. This time, the soul was also dissipating, but it wasn't as big as before. It was probably because of the protection of fetal light. After half of the soul had dissipated, it finally stopped. From its appearance, Chen Zhao could vaguely tell that it was a demon soul. This soul was still in a daze. Occasionally, it would raise its incomplete arm, or float in front of Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao looked at the soul before him, and thought about what to do with it. Never mind. I'll keep it and study it with Blackie. Thinking this, Chen Zhao put the half-finished soul back into the container. Just then Chen Zhao's phone rang. It was 4. Chen, are you free right now? I'm busy, Chen Zhao answered without thinking. It's almost dinner. Then I'll call Fei Lai, Fer said. Okay. Why are you calling me? There's a troublesome patient in the hospital. I need your help, Fer said. Patient? I'm an illegal doctor. Don't forget that you owe me a favor. Who's the patient to you? Why are you calling me to return the favor for this patient? Fer rarely asked Chen Zhao to help treat patients nowadays. The patient is an important witness, but a month ago, he got into a car accident. Get to the point. The patient has been unconscious for a month. If he continues to be unconscious, someone will be acquitted. What's your relationship with the suspect? Chapter 1550. Chen Zhao was pissed off. Fer had forced him to skip dinner. When Chen Zhao arrived at Chantilly Hospital, Fer was having dinner with another man in the hospital's cafeteria. The most important thing was that the man looked handsome and rich. If he were in the movies, he would be like Tony Stark. Seeing Fer grinning from ear to ear at the man's teasing, Chen Zhao got even angrier. Chen Zhao walked up and said in annoyance, "For I rushed here without even eating dinner. You're having so much fun chatting with someone here. Am I disturbing you?" Moscow priest lifted his head and looked at Chen Zhao in confusion. "For, is this your friend? Chen, did you come by plane? I thought you'd need at least an hour." For was also confused. The distance between Moon Coast and Chantilly Hospital was at least 80 kilometers. 30 kilometers were in the city. How did Chen Zhao get to the hospital so quickly? That was why For had come to the cafeteria to eat first. In fact, it was Chen Zhao's first time driving a sports car. In the past, it was just driving. Today Chen Zhao was suddenly interested. He sped on the highway in his Porsche 918. Chen Zhao drove for less than 10 minutes on the 50-kilometer highway. With Chen Zhao's superhuman reflexes, driving close to 300 kilometers per hour was nothing. Of course, the price was that Chen Zhao would have to change the tires of his sports car tomorrow. After that, Chen Zhao felt bored. He wouldn't do it again even if he was beaten to death. No matter how fast the sports car went, it couldn't be faster than Chen Zhao himself. There was no excitement to speak of. To be honest, Chen Zhao had tried it in front of his house. On the ground, Chen Zhao could run as fast as a fighter jet. Even Chen Zhao himself couldn't change the direction of his extreme speed. Unless he ran in a straight line, Chen Zhao would crash into the obstacles on the road. Up until now, Chen Zhao hadn't found any clothes that he could wear while running at full speed. Sometimes, Chen Zhao envied the Hulk's underwear. No matter how big his body became, no matter what kind of attack he suffered, it could still remain intact. Once Chen Zhao unleashed his full speed, the first thing to break would be his clothes. Even Qingyi Haze couldn't protect his clothes. Recently, he had been thinking about using dragon scales to make underwear. Otherwise, once the battle started, Chen Zhao might give himself a torn clothes buff first. Mr. Mesco, this is the doctor I introduced to you. Chen Zhao looked at Moscow. For some reason he felt that Moscow was strange, but he couldn't tell what was strange about it. Mesco Pearl had an extraordinary aura and was handsome. He was tall and slender. Even if he were to appear on the runway, he would still look good. However, Chen Zhao felt that there was something indescribable about Moscow Prior. Temperament? Chen Zhao looked at Mason in confusion. For noticed that Chen Zhao kept staring at Moscow Prior with a strange expression. Mason also felt goosebumps from Chen Zhao's stare. Sir, is there anything on me? Ah. Chen Zhao shook his head. You don't seem to have any injuries, so you don't need my treatment. Four's face darkened. She'd already told Chen Zhao over the phone that it was a comatose patient from a car accident. Chen Zhao clearly didn't want to help. If Four didn't threaten him with a favor, Chen Zhao probably wouldn't move at all. Mr. Mason is the biggest farmer in California, Four introduced. He's my sister's boyfriend. He's also a medical professor at UCLA. The two shook hands. Chen Zhao put more strength into his grip. Mason's face reddened, but he didn't make a sound. Chen Zhao wasn't purposely making things difficult for Mason. Chen Zhao only wanted to confirm if Mason was a spiritualist. Even if he wasn't an enhancer, his hidden magic would automatically be released when he was attacked. This was an instinctive reaction of the body, but Chen Zhao didn't feel any magic from Moscow Prior. It seemed that he wasn't a spiritualist. Four had thought too much. With Four's ability, it wasn't that easy to hide magic from him. What's the relationship between the patient and this farmer? Chen Zhao asked. The patient is called Nulong Kirik. He's one of Mr. Mason's farmers, Four said. You said that Nulong Kirik is a witness for a case. What's going on? Mr. Chen, you're a doctor, right? Mason furrowed his brows. He felt that Chen Zhao was being too nosy. I like to listen to gossip. Only then will I be in the mood to treat patients. Hearing that, Mason and Four both stared at Chen Zhao with darkened expressions. Do you know about the poisoning incident at Daipa Farm half a year ago? Four asked. Chen Zhao froze. As a doctor, he obviously knew about it. It was said that 40 or so employees of the farm had a party at night and went to get some corn, potatoes, and sweet potatoes for the party. In the end, more than 30 people got poisoned and 13 died. The incident was huge. As a doctor, Chen Zhao had also received some data. He knew that they'd been poisoned with cyanide, and it was found in the food. Cyanide was extremely poisonous and had a high fatality rate. Most of the time, people died before they could even save them. Then, the police found cyanide on the plants in many fields of Daipa Farm. Cyanide couldn't be used to make pesticides, so it was obvious that someone had purposely poisoned the sprayed pesticides. 3 months ago, Nulong Kirik admitted that he was the poisoner, and that the person who ordered him was Lila Gavich, a billionaire and the boss of Beck Chemicals. His main product is cyanide, Four said. But a month ago, Nulong Kirik was involved in a tragic car accident while escorting a shipment. He fell into a coma as a result. Was he silenced? Chen Zhao asked. From the current situation, it looks like he was silenced, Four said. Chen Zhao looked at Four. What does this have to do with you? Chen Zhao couldn't help but think that Four had asked him for help because she liked Moscow Pearl. In the list of poison deaths, there's a child that I just cured. He's only 10 years old. He survived throat cancer, but he couldn't survive a conspiracy. Chen Zhao looked at Macy. Why did that patient stand out and expose us? Even if he turns himself in, He'll go to jail for decades. Remember the domain name of this book: 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1551. One of the victims is Nulong Kirik's family. As a capitalist, Chen Zhao had gradually come to understand how sinister capitalists could be. Even if things seemed clear, it was not certain whether the truth was as everyone saw it. Of course, guesses were just guesses. Even if the truth was different, it had nothing to do with Chen Zhao. He was here to return Four's favor. Actually, the sisters were quite similar. After Four finished dinner, the three returned to the hospital. In the hospital, Chen Zhao saw someone he was familiar with, Charla. Charla had just anesthetized a patient and walked out of the surgery room. In America, being an anesthetist was the easiest and the highest paid job. Of course, a top-notch anesthetist like Charla sold her skills. One had to know that many anesthetics were harmful to the body, so the control of dosage was also very particular. Moscow looked at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao seemed to know everyone in the hospital. The doctors and nurses that came and went all greeted him. "Chen, can you hurry? There's still a patient waiting for you. He's been in bed for a month anyway." "There's no hurry," Chen Zhao said nonchalantly. He had no intention of speeding up at all. A female nurse walked over and said some nonsense. When they reached the ICU, Chen Zhao pushed open the door and saw an unconscious patient lying on the bed. After a month, Nulong Kirik was as thin as a stick. He could only rely on injections to maintain his life. This kind of ICU to maintain vital signs cost thousands of dollars per day. A normal family couldn't afford it at all. When Chen Zhao saw Nulong Kirik's soul, he was stunned. There was a nail in the head of Nulong Kirik's soul. Clearly, someone had done something to Nulong Kirik's soul. "Who came here?" Chen Zhao asked. "Is there a problem?" For asked, confused. "Just asking," Chen Zhao said calmly. "Other than the attending doctor, there should only be the nurses," For said. "Aren't you the attending doctor? It's not like you don't know that I'm in charge of oncology." For rolled her eyes. "I'm not familiar with neurology. Other than the attending doctor and nurses, did anyone else come in?" "Do I count?" Moscow priest took the initiative to speak. "Doesn't he have any other family to visit him?" "Yes, but now all of his relatives want to cut ties with him. Even though he has been unconscious for more than a month, not a single relative has come to visit him." Chen Zhao snickered. This was basically being betrayed by his own people. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. For a bit of money, he did such a thing, causing the deaths of dozens of people, and even his own family. It would be strange if such a person was not deserted by his friends and family. "Chen, can you wake him up?" For looked at him. Actually, she wasn't sure if Chen Zhao could wake slave Kirik up again. After all, he was in a vegetative state. Chen Zhao had awakened a vegetative state last time, but that didn't mean he would succeed the second time. "I'll check first," Chen Zhao said. Chen Zhao walked up and checked Nulong's body. Nulong Kirik's body was basically unharmed. Then the problem lay in his soul. Chen Zhao moved his palm to Narang's forehead. Mason, who was standing behind Chen Zhao, suddenly raised an eyebrow. Even though Chen Zhao didn't turn around, he could see Moscow's every movement and expression. He really wasn't a normal person. Chen Zhao had always suspected that Moscow was a spiritualist. For spiritualists, if they sensed something, 99% of it would come true. Now that Chen Zhao confirmed that there was something wrong with Moscow, he was even more certain. As expected, a spiritualist's intuition was never wrong. Chen Zhao pinched the invisible nail between his two fingers. He pulled it lightly and Nu Lang's soul moved along with it. "Chen, do you have a solution?" For asked. "For go out for a while. I have something to discuss with Mr. Moscow." "What?" For frowned. What couldn't he say in front of her? "The consultation fee. I don't want you to see my ugly face." Chen Zhao grinned. For glared at him annoyed. Even if she used a favor to invite Chen Zhao, she couldn't just let him take the consultation fee. "Fine, I'll leave it to you. I'm leaving." For turned and left the ICU. Chen Zhao turned to look at Moscow priest. "Mr. Moscow, you're a spiritualist too, right?" Moscow looked at Chen Zhao and shook his head. "I'm not." "You're not?" "Mr. Moscow, you don't have to hide it from me. I'm indeed not a spiritualist, but I'm also from the spiritual world," Moscow said meaningfully. What do you mean? Chen Zhao was confused. Not a spiritualist, but someone from the spiritual world? Whatever. Since he couldn't understand, he wouldn't care. It didn't have much to do with him anyway. So you stabbed the nail in his forehead? Chen Zhao asked. Yes. Moscow nodded. I did it. Why? Don't you want him to wake up? I did it to save his life, Moscow said. That car accident almost cost him his life. If I hadn't used a secret technique to lock his soul with the soul-locking nail, he would have died a long time ago, said Moscow Pule. Then take it off now, Chen Zhao said. Take it off. Are you sure? Moscow looked at Chen Zhao hesitantly. If I take it off, his soul might leave his body and dissipate. Take it off, Chen Zhao said calmly. I'm a doctor, Chen Zhao said calmly. I'm a doctor who knows a lot about the soul. Chen Zhao didn't even need to draft a lie. He'd only read one magic book and hadn't finished it. But in terms of treating soul damage, even Satan might not be better than him. Moscow reached out and took off the soul-locking nail. His technique was very special. At least Chen Zhao could see something, but he couldn't understand it. Moscow clearly didn't use any magic, and it didn't seem to be magic either. Chen Zhao couldn't help but glance at him a few more times. But Chen Zhao didn't have the time to chat with him now. After he pulled the nail out, he immediately went forward and poured his immortal power into Churang Kirik's soul. The effect of immortal power was very good. It immediately stabilized Nulong Kirik's soul and allowed his soul to reunite with his body. Chapter 1552. Mason was also astonished by Chen Zhao's methods. Healing the soul. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. At least, he'd never heard of anyone who could heal a damaged soul. Magic. Doubt rose in Mason's mind. All right. Chen Zhao stood up. I don't want to know about the inside story. It has nothing to do with me. You understand? Of course, this has nothing to do with you, Mr. Chen. Chen Zhao didn't want to get involved in this. Don't get far involved either. Chen Zhao didn't know if Moscow priest had dragged Far into this intentionally or not. Of course, it was also possible that Chen Zhao was overthinking. Mason didn't bother to explain. He wasn't familiar with Chen Zhao, so he didn't think that there was a need to explain. At this moment, Nulong Kilik moved and opened his eyes. Both Chen Zhao and Mason looked at Narang Kirik. Seeing Mason, Nero's expression changed in an instant. He pulled off the blanket and jumped off the bed, wanting to rush out of the room. Moscow Pule moved like a nimble monkey. He jumped over the bed, and with a tap of his toes, he somersaulted in front of Nulong Kilik to block him. Nero Kirik, where do you think you're going? Mason asked calmly. To be honest, with Nero's current condition, he couldn't run very far. Far heard the commotion and pushed the door open. When he saw Nulong Kirik standing there, he was shocked. Chun he. Looks like he's already recovered. Chen Zhao shrugged. Far didn't understand the situation. Nero Kirik was curled up in a corner, while Moscow Pule stood in front of him, looking down at him from above. Everyone should be responsible for their own actions. Am I right, Nulong Kirik? Narang Kirik raised his head and looked at Moscow Pule in fear. Far, how about you treat me to supper? But here, what's wrong? What can I do for you? Miss Far, thank you for your help. I think I should get him discharged. Also, the police will be here soon, Mason said. All right. Far could tell that something was wrong, but she didn't pursue the matter further. I hope the culprit will be punished. Of course you'll see. Chen Zhao and Far left the ward. Chen Zhao's mind was still thinking about Moscow Pride's elegant movements. That set of movements looked very ordinary, and even most gymnasts could do it. But to Chen Zhao it was different. Maybe gymnasts could do it too, but it was impossible for him to be as elegant and casual as Moscow Pule. He didn't look like he was completing a difficult movement. It was more like he was jogging or walking easily. However, Chen Zhao indeed did not feel any magic from Moscow prior. Chen, do you know what's going on? Farron could not hold back his curiosity. Chen Zhao shook his head. I don't know. It has nothing to do with me. I don't want to get involved in some messy scheme. Scheme? You're saying that Mr. Moscow has a scheme? I didn't say that. I'm just reminding you that a rich person like him will have a lot of complicated entanglements, even if it's an ordinary lawsuit. You're rich too, right? said looking at Chen Zhao. You're not any less than him. I'm a law-abiding citizen. Ha! You don't even have a medical license. You dare say you're a law-abiding citizen? Don't ask me for help next time, Chen Zhao shouted. That won't do. Just once isn't enough to repay the favor you owe me. I shouldn't have asked you for help in the first place, Chen Zhao said in annoyance. At that moment, the elevator door in front of them opened. Two men wearing windbreakers, gentlemen's hats, and sunglasses walked out. That's weird. It's such a hot day. But someone's wrapped up so tightly, said. Chen Zhao glanced at the two and chuckled. Maybe they're fans of The Matrix. With that, Chen Zhao pressed the elevator button. When Chen Zhao and four walked out of the building, gunshots came from upstairs. The window of one of the wards flashed twice. Then, a figure broke through the window and fell to the ground. Four cried out in surprise and hurriedly ran over. The person who fell down was Mason Pryor. Mr. Mesco, how are you feeling? Are you okay? Although Mason fell from the third floor, he seemed to be fine. Fury was written all over Mason's face. He angrily punched the ground with his fist. Damn it, damn it. Nu Lang Kirik is dead. They have spies in the hospital. The moment Nu Lang Kirik woke up, their gunman came. Gunner. It's those two from before? For suddenly understood. Chen Zhao looked at Moscow's expression. It seemed that he was really angry. If he was pretending, it could only be said that his acting skills were really good. Where are the two gunmen now? Are they still in the hospital? For asked. For don't mess around, Chen Zhao said, pulling her back. You're a doctor, not a cop. They're all dangerous killers. But they're hiding in the hospital. It's possible. As they spoke, the entire hospital building suddenly fell into darkness. They cut off the hospital's power. Chen Zhao shrugged. A while later, the police arrived and the three took statements. More police searched the hospital building to see if the two gunmen were still in the hospital. The good news was that apart from Nu Lang Kirik, no one else was injured. On the other hand, Nu Lang Kirik was shot in the head with a single shot. Even Chen Zhao couldn't come back from the dead in such a situation. Chen Zhao and Moscow stood not far away. For was still taking statements. You found the two gunmen? Why do you think so? Nu Lang Kirik is still in the ward. He hasn't come out yet. How could anyone know? Chen Zhao raised his doubt. Less than 10 minutes after Nu Lang Kirik woke up, the two gunmen came. I can't help but suspect that someone leaked the news. Apart from me, for in you, no one else knows that Nu Lang Kirik woke up. Anyway, it's definitely not the two of us. Moscow's expression was very ugly. Suddenly he thought of a possibility. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Godly Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1553. The ICU was monitored 24 hours a day. It was monitored 24 hours a day. Moscow Pool thought of this possibility. Chen Zhao was an outsider. So no matter what he guessed, it had nothing to do with him. For who was recording the police statement had already finished. She wasn't in a good mood. She'd asked Chen Zhao to treat Nunniang Kirik. But Nunniang was cured, but he was dead. For go to Moon Villa and stay there for a few days, Chen Zhao said. You can also take a few days off from the hospital. Although For probably wouldn't get involved in these messy things, Chen Zhao was still worried. No matter what, For was his sister-in-law. No thanks. For rejected Chen Zhao's suggestion. There's a lot of work at the hospital. I don't want to take a break. For rejected Chen Zhao's suggestion. Stay away from that man, Chen Zhao whispered. He's dangerous. However, Moscow Pool seemed to still hear Chen Zhao's voice from more than 20 meters away. He couldn't help but glance at Chen Zhao. For laughed. Chen, you're not jealous, are you? Chen Zhao rolled his eyes. I'm going home. Chen Zhao tried to slow down when he got home. After all, his sports car was too fast when he came. The tires were all worn out. Even the slightest step on the brakes would cause the car to skid. Chen Zhao didn't want his sports car to be damaged. Otherwise, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to repair. However, when he drove out of the city, Chen Zhao felt another car following him. There weren't many cars on this road, and Chen Zhao was driving so slowly. If the car was just passing by, it would have overtaken him already. Chen Zhao still didn't plan on speeding up. He just drove at a steady pace. When he reached the coastal road, the car behind finally overtook him. and stopped in front of Chen Zhao's car. Chen Zhao got out of the car, and a few people also got out. One of them was a big boss. He was of medium height and had a big belly. He held a cigar in his hand and wore an expensive suit. However, it still couldn't hide his nouveau riche aura. The fat man swaggered over to Chen Zhao. There were 2 fully armed bodyguards beside him. Chen Zhao narrowed his eyes at the fat man. He had the same aura as Moscow Pool. No, more accurately, they were similar. After all, Moscow Proust was rather elegant and handsome. In ancient times, he would definitely be an elegant young master. As for the fatty in front of him, he would be a nouveau riche in any era. Of course, it was also possible that he was faking it. "Mister, how should I address you?" the fatty asked. "Do we know each other? I didn't know you before, but it's not too late to get to know you now." The fatty's attitude was quite arrogant. "I'm Lila Gavich, the boss of Bell Chemicals." Chen Zhao tilted his head and looked at Lila Gavich. "I just want to see what kind of person can save my enemy," Lila Gavich said. "I'm a doctor." Lila Gitch waved the hand with the cigar in it. No, ordinary doctors can't do that. I personally shattered Nulong Kirik's soul. Although Mesco Pule used the soul-locking nail to temporarily stabilize Nulong Kirik's soul, he still couldn't wake him up. As time passed, Nulong Kirik's soul would dissipate sooner or later. But you managed to restore Nulong Kirik's soul. So you aren't an ordinary doctor. You must be a spiritualist, right? And then, are you going to take revenge on me for interfering? Haha. No, of course not. He stood before Chen Zhao and patted his shoulder. I'm not that stingy. You're not Moscow Pearl's man. I just admire you. How about it? Come work for me. I can pay you well. Chen Zhao looked at Lila Gavich with a smile. Mr. Lila, do you know that I'm very rich? I think I should be richer than you were before. Lila Gavich froze. How much money do you have? My total assets should be more than $5 billion. Lila Gavich's expression suddenly turned strange. He realized that using a lot of money to bribe Chen Zhao seemed to be completely useless. Unless he gave all his assets to Chen Zhao. Never mind. Goodbye. Lila Gavich turned around awkwardly and left decisively. Mr. Lila, I want to know, did you send the 2 killers in the hospital? Lila Gavich looked back at Chen Zhao and nodded. Yes. Do you want to interfere? No, just satisfy my curiosity. Oh, that female doctor is my sister-in-law. I hope you won't hurt her accidentally. Of course, Lila Gavich replied. Lila Gavich replied. My battle with Mesco Pearl will not involve ordinary people. What about the Daipa farm poisoning incident? You think they're ordinary people? Lila Gavich asked, unconcerned. Chen Zhao was stunned. It seemed that this was more complicated than he'd imagined. However, he didn't know what kind of grudge Lila Gavich and Moscow Pool had. Neither of them were ordinary people. They both had a similar aura. But Chen Zhao still couldn't tell where they came from. Oh, are you interested in doing business with me? No, I'm not interested in your grudges. Chen Zhao rejected directly. I'm not interested. Lila Gavich said that he wanted to do business with him. But Chen Zhao had already done business with him. Thus, he had to be on the opposite side of Moscow Pool. The guy didn't have any good intentions. Plus, Chen Zhao wouldn't easily get involved in unfamiliar industries. What a pity. Lila Gavich's face was filled with disappointment. This time he really didn't look back. Chief, are we just going to let that Asian go like this? Lila Gavich's subordinates found it strange. Since when was Lila Gavich so nice? Even if Chen Zhao was a spiritualist, it shouldn't be enough to make Lila Gavich retreat, right? Plus, it wasn't like they hadn't fought spiritualists before. Most spiritualists could be killed with one bullet. Since that guy didn't panic at all when facing so many of us, he probably has some trump card. Lila Gavich said seriously. Our main target right now is Moscow Pool. I don't want to make unnecessary enemies. Moscow Pool and his people are our biggest enemies. Lila Gavich said seriously. After a moment of silence he asked, by the way, have you found the entrance? Chapter 1554. Daira Farm must be in that area. Lila Gavich's subordinate said with certainty. Lila Gavich's men said with certainty. Daipa Farm isn't big, it shouldn't be hard to find. Not hard. Our people can't even enter Daira Farm now. You think it's easy? Chief, we can't go on the ground, but we can fly in helicopters. Can they shoot our helicopters down from the sky? Lila Gavich's eyes brightened. That's right. Rent a few more helicopters. Just name the price. We just need to find them. Chief, that guy is accusing you. The trial will start in 3 days. Mescopule wants to stall me with this? Dream on. Prepare yourselves for the next few days. Once we find the entrance, we'll charge in. If Mescopule and his tribesmen want to start an all-out war, then bring it on. We're not a bunch of white dogs. Lila Gavich's face was ferocious. His eyes were deep and serious. He was tough, but he knew that a war between the two races wouldn't benefit either side. He knew this very well, and so did Moscow Priest. Just like before, when he had blocked Chen Zhao's way with an arrogant attitude. Actually, he had come to test Chen Zhao's attitude. After confirming that Chen Zhao wasn't related to Mason, and that Chen Zhao wasn't a nobody that could be bullied, he displayed a carefree attitude. Lila Gavich wasn't an idiot. He knew how to judge the situation. Mason returned to Dayura Farm. The seemingly peaceful farm was actually filled with traps and sentries. Mason got out of the car. 2 people walked out of the house, both fully armed. One of them was holding a bow, and was as tall and slender as Mescopule. Chief. Yes, let's talk inside, Mason said. Mason wasn't in a good mood. His expression was even more serious. There were more than 10 people in the living room. Some were standing, some were sitting, some were standing. There were men and women, young and old. Lila Gavich has already shed all pretense of cordiality, Mason said. It's been going on since we lost more than 30 people. One of the elders glanced at Mason and said with some dissatisfaction, You're still hoping to use human law to restrain him. Not using human laws? With the weapons in our hands? With bows and arrows? Or with the blood of our people? We are not afraid of death, as long as death has meaning. Mason sighed. My fellow countrymen, this is no longer the Middle Ages. All of you have your own families. Are you really going to start a war? It's not our choice. It's Lila Gavich and his fallen scum's choice. We don't want war, but we're not afraid of it, a tall man said. Now is not the time to talk about this. The war is coming. Mescopule looked at his clansmen. Lila Gavich has basically confirmed that the entrance to the cave is here. They will definitely investigate it in 3 days. 3 days. As long as we can hold on for 3 days, Lila Gavich won't be able to do anything. A few days ago, those depraved bastards have been wandering around the area. Mason frowned. Was there a conflict? No, they didn't enter our territory. Send all the underage children out of the farm. Send them to our land. No, I can already draw my parasite bow. I can fight, a boy said with a red face. I can help too, another girl said decisively. Children, I'm not joking. This is a real war, Mason said sternly. Mason said sternly, I'm not discussing this with you. This war has nothing to do with the children. The children were the future of their clan. No matter how the war ended, it had nothing to do with them. At this moment, the other tribesmen also felt Mason's attitude towards them. They vaguely realized that the situation was more serious than they had imagined. In fact, in the past 300 years, the two clans had fought many times. From individual fights to group conflicts, there were even fights between more than a dozen people. From individual fights to group conflicts, there were even fights between more than a dozen people. Mason wanted to send the children back to their land. This was no longer a conflict. It was a real war. No one objected to Mason's decision, except for the children at the scene. No one objected to Mason's decision, except for the children at the scene. In a Porsche dealership, 2 underage girls were sitting in a Porsche. Coward, Mason is a coward. He doesn't deserve to be our leader. Bader roared. Shut up. Bauer's expression was extremely dark. Just then, a sports car drove into the store. Their father, a Bracei, walked up enthusiastically like a businessman. Chen Zhao got out of the car and a Bracei walked up. Hello, Mr. Chen. How can I help you? Chen Zhao was an old customer of this store. He had bought both cars here, as well as the Porsche 918 he had given to the handsome boy. At the same time, the 2 cars were also taken care of and repaired here. Apart from buying cars, Chen Zhao spent tens of thousands of dollars here every month. This was why Abrasi was especially polite to him. I need to change my tires, Chen Zhao said. All right, I'll arrange for the repairman to come over and give your car a thorough inspection, Abraki said. Would you like coffee or tea? No need, Chen Zhao said. I'll just walk around your shop. Please help yourself. Abraki was obviously willing to let Chen Zhao walk around the shop. Perhaps Chen Zhao had his eyes on that car. He did plan to buy a car. The main reason was that his garage was too big, but there were too few cars. Therefore, Chen Zhao planned to put 2 or 3 more in to make up the numbers. Chen Zhao went to Bader and Bauer's car. He first walked around the car, then said to the 2 children sitting in the car, Gentlemen, is it convenient for me to try this car? What if I don't? Bader looked up at Chen Zhao, his tone rather unfriendly. Bauer tugged at Bader and then said to Chen Zhao, Sorry, sir. My brother is an idiot. Of course, beautiful lady, I can see that. Chen Zhao glanced at Bader. The kid was clearly in puberty. He was uncharacteristically rebellious toward everything. Hearing Chen Zhao's words, Bader immediately jumped up. Kid, what did you say? Chapter 1555. Abraki came up and slapped Bader's head. Bader, shut up. After scolding Bader, Abraki turned to Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. My son was too rude to you. Chen Zhao chuckled. What else could he do? Scold his son in front of his father? Although Bader was in his rebellious phase, he was still in awe of his father. Standing behind Abraki, he secretly clenched his fist for Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, what do you think of this car? It's not bad. I don't think I've seen it on the market, Chen Zhao said. This is a Porsche 917, 1960 commemorative edition. The entire design is the same as the 1960 version, but the engine is the latest model. Porsche only produced 3, and this is one of them. If no one buys it, it'll be sold to another store in 3 months. How much? Chen Zhao asked. $5,400,000. Abraki looked at Chen Zhao, his eyes shining. Can I bargain? Ha. Abraki rubbed his hands awkwardly and looked at Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, this is a Porsche car. It doesn't belong to me. I don't have the right to decide the price. Fine. Help me with the procedures, and then I'll send you to my house. Abraki was overjoyed. He only earned a small amount from this car, but it was almost half of his monthly income. A few beautiful female employees surrounded Chen Zhao, serving him tea and water. One of them had helped Chen Zhao with the procedures when he bought a car. When she saw Chen Zhao, she didn't come over immediately. Instead, she went to the bathroom to touch up her makeup, and then ran over to greet Chen Zhao. Bader looked at Chen Zhao, who was surrounded by a group of beautiful women. He couldn't suppress the anger in his eyes. He was the young master of this store, but the employees here never treated him nicely. Yet an outsider received such attention here. It was said that women were easily jealous, but in fact men were no less jealous than women. After a while, Abraki walked over to Chen Zhao. Mr. Chen, the tires are changed. Only the 2 back wheels were changed. The front ones are fine, so they don't need to be changed. Chen Zhao was a big client, but Abraki didn't dare to cheat him of his money. Losing a big customer for such a small amount of money was definitely the stupidest business. Someone like Chen Zhao could buy a $5 million sports car without even blinking. Abraki wouldn't kill the goose that laid the golden eggs. Under the greetings of the female employees, Chen Zhao drove away. But just as he reached the intersection, a figure suddenly rushed out. Chen Zhao slammed on the brakes and heard a scream from the front. Chen Zhao was sure that his car hadn't touched it. He was also sure that the person had jumped in front of his car on purpose. Chen Zhao got out of the car and walked to the front. He looked at Bauer on the ground. Just then Bader rushed out from the side. Kid, you. Bader grabbed Chen Zhao's collar. My coat is a Baroness, $9,888. My shirt is a rabbit head, $3,888. I also have a team of lawyers under me that doesn't have any clients yet. My car is also equipped with a driving recorder. Chen Zhao looked calmly at the youth who was a head shorter than him. Before you do anything, you have to confirm if your father is willing to pay the compensation. Bader wasn't old, but he was still scared by Chen Zhao. The so-called rebellious phase only happened to people close to you. Most youths felt that their families allowed them to be rebellious. That was why they vented their frustrations and unhappiness on their family members. But others wouldn't give in to them, such as Chun Zhao. If you do anything, I can guarantee that you'll be sent to the juvenile detention center for half a year. You think I'm afraid of you? Bader still looked aggressive, but his tone had softened. Clearly, he also realized that it wasn't a good idea to work with his sister to blackmail Chun Zhao. Kid, you should learn to control your emotions. Chun Zhao patted Bader's cheek. Bader was so angry that his face turned red. He gritted his teeth and stared at Chun Zhao. I'm going to kill you. Just because of that, I can let you stay in the juvenile detention center for half a year. Just then Bauer pulled Bader away and smiled sweetly. Sir, I'm really sorry about what happened earlier. We actually just wanted to play a little joke with you. They didn't say the other half and blackmail Chun Zhao for some money. Their father had a sizable sports car shop, but they didn't have much pocket money. Their first impression of Chun Zhao was that he was rich. Secondly, they thought that Chun Zhao wouldn't mind spending some money to solve a small problem. Unfortunately, they were still too inexperienced. Just then, a sports car of the same model as Chun Zhao stopped beside the three. A tall, sexy woman wearing sunglasses alighted from the Porsche. Mom. Bauer's expression froze. The woman came before Chun Zhao. She looked at the furious Bader, and then at the panic-stricken Bauer. She immediately guessed that her child had gotten into trouble again. Sir, may I ask if my two children have offended you in any way? Nothing, just a small misunderstanding. Chun Zhao glanced at the two children, not planning to pursue the matter. After Chun Zhao left, Undine turned to look at the two kids. There was no anger on her face, but Bauer and Bader could feel the frosty coldness from their mother. I thought that even if I don't send you back to the clan, and keep you by your father's side, he'll still be able to discipline you. Undine's tone was extremely cold, and her face was emotionless. But I was wrong. Your father can't control you at all. Their father, Embark, was just an ordinary person, an ordinary businessman. He didn't know how special his wife and two children were at all. Looks like I have to send you back to the clan land. No, Mom, don't send us back, Bauer yelled. If you send us there, we'll die. We'll definitely die. Once we go in, we'll need at least 3 years to come out. I don't want to spend our adolescence there. Undine's expression returned slightly. She also couldn't bear to send her children to the clan land. If they were sent there, it would mean that they wouldn't see each other again for at least 3 years. Can you promise that you won't cause trouble again? Yes. I promise I won't cause any more trouble. Chapter 1556. Bader still cared about his dignity, but his sister Bao had completely become her mother's puppy. She would do whatever her mother wanted her to do. She would say whatever her mother wanted her to say. Bader was a bit of a male chauvinist. But Bader was actually more afraid of his mother than Bauer. Bauer had been obedient and clever since she was young. She always showed a sweet mouth to everyone. But Bader had been punished by his mother Undine since he was young. Undine was also having a headache now. If she didn't send the two little bastards to the clan's land, who would watch over them? Moscow Pearl had already ordered them to assemble. A war between the two clans could really break out. And as one of the guarantees of their clan's combat power, Undine couldn't hide at home to watch over the two little guys. But their father couldn't watch over them. Until now, Abrasai still thought that Bauer and Bader were just active and lively. He still didn't know what was so special about Bauer and Bader. In his eyes, they were just kids. Even if you stuffed a gun in their hands, they might not dare to pick it up. Mother, take us to the farm, Bader suddenly said, looking up. You shut up, Undine immediately reprimanded. That wasn't a child's game. It was the real charaba. Even Undine didn't dare to say that her side would definitely win. Not to mention that she had to bring the two brats along. But the two kids' eyes were shining, and they couldn't be stopped. No matter how strict Undine's tone was, it couldn't erase the light in their eyes. In the end, Undine still sighed. She knew that she had compromised. Go and tell your father, Undine said coldly. Bao, and Bader went to their father's shop and told Abrasai that they were going on a trip with their mother. Abrasai thought that they were really going on a trip, and repeatedly told them not to cause trouble for Undine. Undine brought the excited Bao and Bader to the farm. Mason was having a discussion with a few elders of his tribe. When they saw the black-faced Undine come in with Bao and Bader, everyone in the front hall was stunned. "Undine, why did you bring them here? Didn't I say that all the underage children in the tribe are to be sent to the land?" Mason questioned angrily. "Mr. Chief, since I've brought them here, I've already made preparations. If they die in battle, then it's their fate," Undine said indifferently, even if he valued Bader and Bao'er's lives more than anyone else. But that was all she could say now. "Furthermore, I don't think it's a good thing to send the children to the clan's land. Flowers that have not experienced the wind and rain will not be able to support the clan's future," Undine said. Mason and the other old men were stunned for a moment before they fell silent. "Since you are here, take a seat," Mason said softly. Hoo. Just then, the sound of a helicopter came from outside. "Who's here?" Undine was puzzled. "No one is coming. It's that group of bastards' helicopters." Mason clenched his teeth and said, "Since today, they've been using helicopters to fly around our farm, trying to find out where the entrance is. Why don't they shoot down?" Undine's eyes were filled with anger. "They've been guarding against us, hovering a few hundred meters above the ground. How can we shoot them down? A few hundred meters above the ground, only a sniper rifle could hit them. But the turbulence from the helicopter could deflect the bullets. Besides, there were many good archers in the tribe who used bows and crossbows, but not many who used guns. Of course, they were not stubborn people. They knew the power of guns. It was just that their tribe was born with great talent. He was gifted in using bows and crossbows. Almost every child could learn how to use a bow and crossbow in a short time." Undine walked out of the house and looked at the helicopter flying high in the sky. Her face was filled with anger. Although Undine was a woman, she was famous for her temper in the tribe. But now their nemesis was doing whatever it wanted above their heads. How could she tolerate it? Undine grabbed a machine gun out of nowhere and fired furiously at the sky. However, doing so would only allow him to vent a little. Weekend Shinjiao arrived at the headquarters of the association. Many people were gathered in the empty space. Klaus and the Lightning Team, Gaia, Little Grove and Elite Ruan Faxaban, Moore Raz Jalanash Giselle Moore and Alice. They were all going to explore the underground this time. Originally, Helis and Norma wanted to participate too, but their heat resistance was really not high enough. More accurately, their own magic made them very sensitive to high temperatures. They were even more sensitive than regular people. It wasn't just them. Many people in the association wanted to go underground too, but they couldn't reach the heat resistance standard, so they lost the chance. Both Qinzhao and West were firm on this matter. Those who couldn't reach the standard couldn't go. There was no room for negotiation. Underground exploration wasn't a joke. Even Qinzhao wasn't completely confident that he could bring them all back safely. There was a huge risk involved in this matter. After all, they weren't facing demons, but nature, the most violent force in the world. "Are all the participants here?" Chen Zhao looked at everyone. Previously, he'd thought about giving everyone a uniform, but he still couldn't come up with a style that everyone was satisfied with. Unexpectedly, everyone's uniform was the same this time. "I'll say the ugly words first," Chen Zhao said. "Even I'm not confident this time. So if you're scared, you can leave now. Once you go underground, it'll be impossible to leave." "President, don't worry," Klaus said. "No one will leave." What a joke. If anyone left now, it'd be a huge embarrassment. Which of the people who signed up to participate wasn't proud and arrogant? How could they accept something like getting cold feet? Actually, Chen Zhao had made a lot of preparations. For example, he'd brought many resources. "Then let's go." "President, are we going to the Crypt Demon's Nest?" "No, Mirror Lake," Chen Zhao said. "Mirror Lake? Why are we going there?" "President, did you leave something behind?" "No," Chen Zhao said. "There's an underground river that leads deep underground." Everyone stared at Chen Zhao stunned. They didn't expect Mirror Lake to have an underground river. Chapter 1557. They arrived at Mirror Lake. Everyone felt a little sorry for the once beautiful villa that was now only a ruin of Mirror Lake. Of course, to Chen Zhao, it was just a house. Even if it was destroyed 10 or 100 times, it would be fine as long as no one was hurt. The biggest value of Mirror Lake and the surrounding land wasn't the house. It was the natural scenery and some changes that had been made to the land, and the old turtle's internal alchemy that had sunk into the lake. Hey, are you really not going to consider buying accident insurance before we leave? Angelite's words drew everyone's angry glares. Angelit, do you want to die? Angelit, you better buy insurance first, or I won't be able to resist killing you. They all glared at Angelit with murderous expressions. Okay, stop messing around, Chen Zhao said. The underground river tunnel is over there. Is it okay for you to swim there? Angelit sprinted. He stepped on the water surface and dashed hundreds of meters away. He stood where he was. Chen Zhao flew over directly. When he was above Angelit, he looked at him in confusion. Angelit, how did you step on the water? President, my feet vibrate at a high frequency to increase the contact area, Angelit said. Chen Zhao looked at Angelit and realized that his legs had been moving at high speed. Just then, the others arrived one after another. Of course, apart from Chen Zhao, only Gaia and Jalanash could fly. However, they didn't choose to fly over. Instead, they chose to swim. People always said that magicians had poor stamina, but that wasn't the case. In fact, this was not the case. Most mages had much better stamina than ordinary people. Non-strengthening type spiritualists couldn't completely convert magic into stamina or strengthen their bodies. However, magic could still improve their bodies. Spiritualists were also much more resistant to damage than regular people. A grenade could cause fatal damage to a regular person, but it might not be fatal to a spiritualist. As for Klaus and the lightning team, they wouldn't be tired even if they swam 10 kilometers. Everyone arrived at the designated spot. I'll go down first, Chen Zhao said. You guys follow. You need to hold your breath for at least 3 minutes. Prepare yourselves. If anyone can't do it, just say it. I have a portable oxygen inhaler. In the end, no one asked for a portable oxygen inhaler. Chen Zhao dove into the water and into the entrance of the underground river. Compared to the difficulty of going up last time, going down was much smoother. After all, they were going with the flow. Chen Zhao was the first to go down, mainly to clear the obstacles. After all, this was the entrance to an underground river. Who knew what kind of things were sucked in every day? It could be a stone or a tree branch. Some of them were obstructed by the terrain and rocks. If the others were to follow the current and hit an obstacle at such a high speed, they would most likely be directly injured. Chen Zhao quickly cleared the obstacles along the way. The others also slid down and followed closely behind him. In less than 3 minutes, Chen Zhao's body lightened, and he fell uncontrollably. Putong! Chen Zhao charged into the underground lake. Behind him, Gaia fell into the water. Then the association members fell down one by one. When everyone emerged from the water, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. This place was not as dark as they had imagined before they set off, nor was it as scorching hot as they had imagined. At least within the range of this underground lake, everyone could still feel a trace of coolness. The surrounding rock walls seemed to contain some minerals. They were glowing weakly at the moment. However, the entire rock wall made the entire underground lake resplendent and gorgeous. There were some species in this lake that were completely different from those on land. Most of them had no vision, but they had extremely powerful senses of smell and perception. Last time, Chen Zhao had killed many of them. Now there were no threatening creatures in the entire lake. From this, it could be seen that these species grew very slowly. They needed sufficient time to develop. It could be more than 10 years, or it could be decades or even longer. Don't be careless, Chen Zhao reminded. There are some dangerous creatures in the water. In fact, everyone's area was within Chen Zhao's surveillance range. If there was really danger, Chen Zhao would be the first to react. While they'd been in the water, some larger creatures had indeed approached. However, they'd all been scared away by Gaia's dragon aura. Even if Gaia didn't transform, she still had her dragon aura. The more sensitive a creature was, the more sensitive they would be to this aura. Let's go to the shore first, Chen Zhao said. When they reached the shore, they realized that there were many skeletons here. What happened here? Last time I was here, I killed many creatures in this lake, Chen Zhao said as he poured out the water in the helmet. This helmet had been developed by Jiaolek. Although the main body of the helmet was made of metal, it was a metal that didn't conduct heat. It had very good heat insulation. The helmet's visor was dark glass. Apart from sniper rifles, normal guns couldn't penetrate it. Together with the dragon scale armor, it looked like a single soldier battle armor in sci-fi movies. Of course, this set of equipment was worn by Chen Zhao, Klaus, and the Lightning Team. Apart from magic resistance, the dragon scale armor also had strong resistance against attacks, and was not easily damaged. Traditional spiritualists like Jalanash, on the other hand, were more casual in their outfits. They were wearing magic dragon scale armor, which would not increase the weight of their bodies, nor would it affect their spellcasting. Gaia didn't need any equipment at all. She could jump into the lava directly. Chen Zhao also put on the dragon scale armor, because it looked really cool. The only thing that made Chen Zhao unhappy was that he'd wanted to add a cloak. In the end, Ruan Faxben, Dongye Tianqi, and Jinkira all rejected Chen Zhao's suggestion. They said that a cloak wouldn't increase one's combat ability at all. Instead, it would be a burden, especially the long cloak that Chen Zhao had requested, one that dragged on the ground. It was superfluous. Chen Zhao was very unhappy. However, seeing that they designed the dragon scale armor so cool, Chen Zhao could reluctantly forgive them. Chen, where should we go now? Gaia turned to look at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao froze. He looked at the tunnels on the wall nearby. They seemed different from what he remembered. Chapter 1558. Although the movement of the tectonic plates under the ground was very active, however, they should still be deep within the Earth's crust. The thickness of the Earth's crust was less than 20 kilometers, but it was already very thick for humans. Of course, there were also places to eat. Chen Zhao wasn't sure if they were at the boundary between the thin layers of the Earth's crust. If it was at the boundary of the thin crust, then the crustal activity here would be very active. It was like a flowing water source. Perhaps in a day, it would change the landscape. Chen Zhao remembered that he had discovered a lava pool in this area last time. Chen Zhao became more and more suspicious. Could this be an active continent? If that was the case, perhaps a small earthquake would bring about a disaster. Of course, since they were here to explore, everyone must be mentally prepared. Just pick one. This one, Chen Zhao said casually. Chen Zhao lifted his foot and was about to walk into the chosen tunnel when Gaia said, "I'll walk in front." "Oh, then you take the lead." They were here for the trial anyway. If Chen Zhao took the lead, it would be meaningless. But since Chen Zhao didn't want to take the lead, he would take the tail. Gaia led the way, while Chen Zhao protected the back. But Gaia had just walked into the chosen tunnel. Suddenly something red flashed by. Before Gaia could react, he was sent flying. It was a gigantic arachne. Chen Zhao was already quite familiar with the arachne. This arachne's main body was only 4 to 5 meters long, but its limbs were over 25 meters long. There was also a group of ordinary arachne following behind this big arachne. Prepare for battle. Gaia stood up. She looked energetic and uninjured. Chen Zhao still stood at the back, not planning to attack. "These spider demons are great food," Chen Zhao reminded. "Their flesh contains a substance that can strengthen magic in body. I call this substance earth essence. Normal earth essence is white. If the content is higher, it'll be dark yellow or bright yellow. The best is gold. Don't waste it." Ruan Faxi was beside Chen Zhao. He didn't attack either. In fact, he took this opportunity to come here, to look for some connecting materials that could not be found on the surface. Hearing Chen Zhao's words, Ruan's interest was piqued. No matter how intense the battle was, Ruan Faxi would pick up a severed arachne limb and dig out a piece of tender flesh. He sniffed and immediately smelled the aroma of crab meat, but it was even more fragrant. Ruan Faxben licked it again. Although it hadn't been cooked, it was already in the palate. Ordinary arachne possessed very little earth essence. It was very rare. Ruan Faxi tried several times and used various alchemy techniques, but he couldn't extract it. "Give it to me. I'll teach you how to extract it." Chen Zhao was an expert in this. After all, he was the first person in the association to know and come into contact with the essence of the earth. Chun Zhao sent his immortal power into the spider's broken limb, destroying its structure. Then he took it back. The earth essence in the arachne's flesh came out along with it. Chun Zhao had used magic power before, but now it was immortal power. However, the principle didn't change, and neither did the results. It was just that there was too little earth essence in a severed limb like this. It might not even be 1 gram. Chun Zhao could probably only extract about 5 grams of earth essence from an entire arachne. Gaia, Klaus, and the lightning team will handle the battle at the front, Chun Zhao called. Everyone else, come over and extract the earth essence together. But we have to separate the quality of the earth essence. Don't let low-level earth essence mix with high-level earth essence. It'll affect the quality. Leader, we found it. We found the entrance. Lila Gavich was overjoyed. Everyone move out. Those who are underage shouldn't come. On this point, Lila Gavich and Mesko Pryor were surprisingly in agreement. They looked like big capitalists on the surface, but they actually had their own races behind them. Even if it concerned the future of the 2 races, he didn't want to bet on the future. No matter which race it was, children were the hope of the future. Lila Gavich appeared to be carefree, and even looked like a mafia boss, but that was just his disguise. The future of the Dark Elves depends on this operation. Elves had appeared in many European mythologies. According to legends, elves were handsome, free, elegant, and had long lives. They were a race that lived with nature, and were good at using bows and arrows. In these legends, there was always a name that wasn't so beautiful, Dark Elves. If elves were a collection of all good things, then Dark Elves were a collection of all evil. Dark Elves were always accompanied by derogatory terms like evil, darkness, and depravity. However, this wasn't the case. The only difference between Dark Elves and White Elves was their race. It was like the difference in skin color among humans. Of course, racial discrimination had always existed among the elves. The war between the White Elves and Dark Elves had lasted for 3,000 years. Since ancient times, the 2 races had been incompatible like fire and water. There had been a short period of peace, but not long after, war would break out again. In fact, elves didn't just consist of Dark Elves and White Elves. There were also some elves from other branches. For example, there were forest elves, sea elves, and wilderness elves. However, these 3 were already quite rare. Even if there were, they were probably hidden in human society. Even the mainstream Dark Elves and White Elves didn't have any news about them. Lila Gavich brought his people to the outskirts of Daipa Farm. However, before they could step into the farm, the owner stopped them. Mesko Pool couldn't hide his anger as he saw Lila Gavich get out of the car. Bastard, what are you doing at my farm? Lila Gavich's eyes flashed with anger at Mesko Pool's insulting words. Even though White Elves had called Dark Elves this way for thousands of years, every time Lila Gavich heard it, he would still be furious. However, Lila Gavich remained calm and had a smile on her face. Of course I'm here to play. What, am I not welcome? Please remember this book's domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 1559. Here to play. He brought the entire Dark Elf tribe here to play? Mosko glanced at the fleet of over 50 black MPVs behind Lila Gavich. Each car could carry at least 8 people. In other words, there were over 400 people in these 50 cars. Lila Gavich had really brought his entire tribe. The tribesmen behind Mosko had already surrounded him. Everyone was ready for battle. Some no longer concealed their weapons, regardless of whether it was a crossbow or a gun. Both were already in his hands. But no one fired, because they knew that once they started fighting, it would be time for the war to start. Everyone was waiting for Mosko's orders. You brought so many people here to play. My farm doesn't welcome you. Lila Gavich took a deep puff of his cigar and spat it on Mosko's face. That isn't up to you. Just then, in another direction of the farm, there was a sudden loud noise, followed by a ball of fire rising into the sky. Mosko's expression changed drastically. He looked at Lila Gavich. You. Oh no. You fell for it. Mosko was furious. Attack. Lila Gavich suddenly moved and retreated. Mosko's expression was uncertain. He wanted to do it himself. But he had to bring people to reinforce the other side of the farm. It had to be said that Lilagavic had played his hand beautifully. He appeared personally, and had his men drive over 10 cars to block the entrance of the farm. This made Moscow think that Lilagavic was going to attack the farm from the front. In fact, the 50 or so cars were empty. Each car only had one driver. Leave 100 people behind. The rest follow me, Moscow Pearl said. Moscow led his men to reinforce the other side of the farm, but when they arrived, they found that the battle was already over. There were over 10 corpses on the ground. They were all dark elf corpses. What happened? Did they retreat? Moscow asked in shock. Patriarch, that's all they came. We've already annihilated all of them. Moscow's expression changed again. Damn it, he fell for it again. That old fox. Quick, send reinforcements to the front. Mason exclaimed. There were 100 clansmen left in front, and if the true main force of the Dark Elves was in front, then his clansmen would suffer disastrous losses. At this moment Undine said, Chief, what if this is another trap? Mason was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. What if this place was still an illusion? If the Dark Elves were to charge in this direction, it would be troublesome. No, he couldn't continue like this. If this went on, he and his clansmen would be too passive. Everyone gather at the big house. Macy said. Actually, the best way was not to take the initiative to intercept. The farm was so big, with an area of more than 10 square kilometers. If they were to block the leaks everywhere, they would be exhausted. With the cunning of that old fox, Lilagavic, it was only a matter of time before he killed them with this trick. But in fact, this was a mistake that Moscow Priest had made. In fact, they were the defending side, so they didn't need to rush around. They could wait at ease and gather all their forces. They wouldn't be tricked by Lilagavic. At this moment at the front of the farm, after Mason left with his men, Lilagavic also launched an attack. The people in the 50 vehicles all came down. He had purposely created an illusion to make Moscow think that all the cars were empty. In fact, it was just a diversion tactic. His real goal was to take out the White Elves in front of him. But at this moment, a loud horn sounded from the center of the farm. The White Elves who were fighting fiercely with the Dark Elves at the front heard the horn and started to retreat. Lilagavic was a little disappointed, but he couldn't do anything if the White Elves wanted to retreat. Chief, what do we do now? How many did we lose? Including the 15 that pretended to attack from the back and the crossfire just now, 28 died. What about them? They left around 40 bodies. That's a big loss, Lilagavic said with a pained expression. Although they had used a trick this time to let the Dark Elves gain a little advantage, they also lost people. However, they had also lost people, so it was hard to say who had taken advantage of the situation. Spread out and enter, Lilagavic ordered. Chief, aren't we going in together? One of his men asked. Idiot, there are countless mines buried along the road. Going in head-on is suicide. They probably have heavy weapons, Lilagavic said. Actually, there was another advantage of spreading out. They could avoid a war of attrition. Both the Dark Elves and the White Elves didn't want to fight a war of attrition. Lilagavic and his men weren't here to fight to the death with the White Elves. They were here to enter the entrance to the crypt. The farm was filled with sorghum and corn. It was big enough to hide a person. The Dark Elves started to spread out to the fields and moved towards the entrance of the crypt. There were also White Elves hiding in the fields. Soon a fight broke out in the fields. Lilagavic walked towards the center of the farm from the main road. Thud! Lilagavic suddenly felt like he had stepped on something. His reaction was extremely fast. It wasn't the reaction of a fat man at all. Lilagavic dodged to the side. An explosion instantly engulfed him. But when the flames of the explosion dissipated, Lilagavic continued forward unscathed. Boom, boom, boom. Who knew how many mines he had stepped on along the way? Lilagavic wasn't hurt at all. That bastard Moscow Prowl, how many mines did he plant here? Lilagavic cursed to himself. When this war is over, this farm will probably be destroyed. After all, there were hundreds of mines buried in the farm. If his men or children stepped on them, they would be in deep trouble. When he reached the end of the road, Moscow Prior stood in front of Lilagavic. Bastard, where are you going? Lilagavic's face twitched. He took a deep puff from his cigar. What a hateful bastard. Can't you let me pass more easily? Your body can pass. Chapter 1560. With a flick of his right hand, Mescal shot a dagger at Lilagavik. Sway Meng Xiao Yin Lilagavik took a step back, but he was too slow. The end of the cigar in his mouth had been cut off. Lilagavik looked even more displeased. He increased his strength and flicked his finger. Mescal shot out another dagger and cut off another half of the cigar in the air. The dagger didn't change its direction. It still shot at Lilagavik. The moment it was about to hit Lilagavik, Liligovich, on the other hand, seemed to be transparent. The dagger passed through his head unscathed. It wasn't the first time Mescal and Lilagavik had fought. He knew Lilagavik's ability very well. Shadow. That was the ability of the Dark Elves. But it wasn't innate. Only the High Dark Elves could awaken it. Lilagavik looked like a meatball. In fact, he was a High Dark Elf. The High Dark Elves could freely switch between reality and shadow. Be it physical or magical attacks, he could easily dodge them. Of course, this trick wasn't invincible. The High Dark Elves couldn't hide in the shadow forever. With Lilagavik's current strength, he could hide in the shadow for 3 seconds. But for Lilagavik, 3 seconds was enough to change the situation. Mescal shot 3 daggers in a row. This time Lilagavik had to hide. It was as if Macy Cole had countless daggers on him. No one knew where he hid the daggers, but he kept shooting them at Lilagavik. Suddenly Lilagavik lifted his clothes. Mescal looked up. He saw that Lilagavik's clothes were full of grenades. Mescal's expression changed, and he quickly retreated. But at this time, Lilagavik had already taken off his coat and thrown it at Mescal. Mace Keller moved even faster. He pointed at the jacket that was full of grenades. A white light shot out from Mescal's finger and instantly enveloped the coat. Under Mescal's control, the coat suddenly rose into the air. Bang! It wasn't the sound of grenades exploding. Those weren't grenades at all, but smoke bombs. Oh no! Mason Koppel groaned inwardly. He had been tricked again. That damned old fox. The smoke bomb instantly enveloped the area. Hee. Lilagarovic laughed proudly. But at this time, Mescal could no longer see Lilich. Ouch! Lilich suddenly cried out in pain and reached out his hand. Liligiwix was surprised to find it was a little girl. Then a roar came from the fog. Let go of Bao Air. Lilagavik grabbed at the thick fog with his other hand, and Bader was also caught in his hand. This is an adult's game. Kids get lost. Although Lilagavik and the White Elves were mortal enemies, however, he still had a moral bottom line in his heart. Lilagajevic threw the 2 kids out of the thick fog. Lilijevic had no intention of fighting. His real goal was not to fight to the death with the White Elves. He planned to enter the entrance of the crypt. These smoke bombs were not ordinary smoke bombs, but special magic smoke bombs. These magic smoke bombs could quickly spread around in a very short time. Soon, half of the farm was shrouded in the thick fog released by the smoke bombs, with the center of the farm as the origin point. Lilijevic walked in the direction of the entrance of the crypt. At this time, Mescal could not find Lilijevic at all. He could not even tell where he was going. Lilijevic was quite pleased with himself. This time, he had schemed against Mescal and played him around. It was a rare victory, but at this time a chill approached. Lilijevic stopped in his tracks and caught an arrow between his fingers. Lilijevic saw Bao Air's figure flash in the thick smoke. At this moment, Bader launched another sneak attack. However, he was facing Lilijevic, a High Dark Elf. Even if he didn't use the shadow element, he had absolute power under his bloated appearance. Lilijevic clenched his left hand, and Bader's fist was caught by him. Little guy, if you don't get lost, I won't go easy on you. However, Bader responded with a kick to Lilijevic's crotch. Damn fatty, do you think I'm afraid of you? Lilijevic suddenly pulled Bader. Bader screamed as an arrow hit him in the shoulder. Bao Air, you shot me. Sorry. Bao Air apologized in the thick smoke. Lilijevic snickered. These 2 little fellows posed no threat to him at all. However, the game ended here. Lilijevic threw Bader aside and continued to walk toward the entrance of the crypt. Soon Lilijevic found the entrance. Uft! Lilajevic laughed strangely again. Maskell had planted many mines at the entrance. However, this mine was no threat to him. Suddenly Lilajevic frowned as Bader attacked again. However, he did not know that there were a large number of mines buried here. Lilajevic hesitated for a moment, then pulled Bader over, and threw him into the entrance of the crypt. How could that idiot Maskell let 2 miners participate in this war? Ah, you killed Bader. I'll kill you. Bao Er, who was hiding nearby, saw that Bader was thrown into the entrance of the crypt. She immediately shouted and rushed toward Lilajevic. At the same time, she shot 3 arrows in a row, but they did not hit Lilajevic. She had stepped on a mine herself. Lilajevic gritted his teeth. Fuck, I was an intruder, but now I've become a babysitter. That idiot. Lilajevic used the same trick again, and threw Bao Er into the entrance of the crypt. At this time, the thick smoke began to dissipate. Lilajevic took out a black horn and blew it. Wu Maskell's expression changed. This was the signal for the dark elves to retreat. Had Lilajevic found the entrance? Maskell rushed to the entrance and saw Lilajevic standing there. Are you here to see me off, Maskell? Lilajevic grinned at Maskell. Chapter 1561. Mosko's face darkened. He could no longer stop Lilajevic now. Lilajevic was just too cunning. He had thought that Lilajevic would fight him head-on. But it turned out that Lilajevic had no intention of doing so. He had been trying to avoid an all-out war. Now Lilajevic had 1 foot in the entrance. But at this moment a frost arrow shot over. Lilajevic dodged it with a shadow, but the frost arrow exploded in an instant. The cold air it released turned into an ice wall, blocking the entrance. At that moment, Mosko Pool and Lilajevic's expressions became very interesting. Mosko had thought that he had lost. Lilajevic had thought that he had won too. But the result had been reversed. The entrance was sealed in ice. Most importantly, Lilajevic had no choice but to retreat. This was the center of the farm. The dark elves had already retreated after hearing Lilajevic's horn. Now there were only white elves around. Seeing Undine walk out, Lilajevic's expression became even more interesting. Hi Undine, I'm so happy to see you. Fatty, how do you want to die? Undine asked coldly. If it was just Mosko and Undine, Lilajevic would not be afraid. Even if he could not win, he could still escape. But now, he definitely did not have to face just Mosko and Undine. When are you going to divorce that useless man? Lilajevic asked with a shy face. You're still talking nonsense when you're about to die. I'm babbling nonsense? I know you've been living apart for a year. Lilajevic smiled. Oh, I saw your 2 kids just now. They're called Bao and Bader, right? Where are they now? I accidentally threw them into the entrance of the crypt. By the way, don't worry, I left a mark on them. Now, it was Undine and Mosko's turn to change. You damn fat pig. Undine roared angrily. What an affectionate title. Lilajevic seemed to enjoy the affectionate title. Undine, don't open the ice seal. Mason looked at Undine. Lilajevic smiled but said nothing. Mason became even more anxious when he saw Undine's hesitation. Undine, do you want our plan to fail? And I've told you before, don't bring children to the battlefield. Mason exclaimed excitedly. Lilajevic knew her old lover too well. The more impatient Mason was, the more Undine would run in the opposite direction. Undine looked at Lilajevic and said coldly, They are your children. If they die in there, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Lilajevic's expression became even more interesting. He opened his mouth for a long time, but no sound came out. After saying that, Undine pointed her finger, and the ice wall instantly cracked before collapsing. Instead, Lilajevic jumped into the entrance to the crypt. Lilajevic kept slipping down, her mind a mess. No wonder they could find me in the thick smoke, Lilajevic muttered to himself. They have dark elf blood. Outside the entrance, Mason glared at Undine angrily. Before he could speak, Undine sprinted and jumped into the crypt. Mason's expression changed. After a moment of hesitation, he still jumped in. Since Lilajevic had already entered the crypt, he couldn't fall behind. The battle ended. Is anyone hurt? Raz, Chen Zhao said. You're in charge of checking them. If they're injured, treat them. It was a good battle. They'd killed hundreds of spider demons, including a big one. There was a big bottle of the most common earth essence, about 2 liters. There was a small bottle of the more advanced earth essence, less than 100 grams. There was also a small bottle of the best golden earth essence, about the same amount as the advanced ones. The main thing was that the big spider was more than the normal ones, and the quality was high too. Everyone had worked together to kill the big spider, but Gaia's contribution was the most. No one could deny this. However, this battle definitely wouldn't be easy. This was only the first battle, but it had already made everyone feel pressured. They continued going deeper. Most of the time, they needed a light source to explore the way in the tunnel. However, they didn't need to bring their own light source. Alice, Jalanash, and Ruan Faxben all had a spell that could create a stable light source. Even Moraz knew this little spell. Suddenly the ground shook. A crack appeared under everyone's feet. Oh no! Chen Zhao suddenly sped up and grabbed Ruan Faxben, who was hanging in the air. Ruan Faxben was also frightened at this moment. This was because beneath his feet was a pool of magma. The sudden earthquake had torn the passageway apart, exposing the magma river below. Thankfully the crack wasn't big. They could jump over it. However, this earthquake still served as a reminder to everyone. The danger they faced wasn't just from the underground creatures. There was also the power of the earth. This was the biggest threat. Even Chen Zhao didn't dare to say that he could protect them completely. Chen Zhao still walked at the back. This was a good position. He could observe everyone in front. But the second earthquake came again. It was even stronger than the first. Chen Zhao saw that the rock layer above the tunnel seemed to be falling. Fuck! Without thinking, Chen Zhao charged forward. He pushed up with his arms and lifted the huge rock layer up. However, the force of the fall was far beyond his imagination. No. 10,000 techniques returned to 1. Chen Zhao immediately used his ultimate move. Instantly, Chen Zhao's strength increased several times. Chen. Gaia looked back. Go over. Chen Zhao still felt the pressure. The weight of the rocks connected to it was probably 1,000,000 tons. Right now, Chen Zhao was barely hanging on. He was relying on the friction between the rocks and the ground to barely hold on. Hurry, I can't hold on anymore. Chen Zhao roared. Chen Zhao's veins were bulging. He didn't know how long it had been since he'd been so tired. Of course, as long as they all went over, Chen Zhao could let go. No one dared to delay. They all ran forward with all their might. The more they dawdled, the more pressure Chen Zhao felt. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 1562. Chen Zhao wasn't the first to collapse. It was the ground under Chen Zhao's feet. A huge force poured into the ground that Chen Zhao's feet were supporting him. The ground began to crack and then completely collapsed. On top of that, there was a huge pressure on Chen Zhao's head. In an instant, Chen Zhao was pressed down. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. Fortunately, the toughness of his body wasn't enough to crush Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao's body fell into the lava. At the same time, there were rocks as big as small mountains above him. Thankfully, the weight of the rock wasn't completely on Chen Zhao. After falling into the lava, the immortal power in his body became even more active and covered his body. Chen Zhao started destroying the rocks on his body. After more than 10 minutes of effort, Chen Zhao finally crawled out from under the rock. The dragon scale armor on his body was still intact, and his helmet was not damaged. Chen Zhao poured the lava out of the armor. Chen Zhao looked around. There was a river of lava around him. Chen Zhao flew above the lava river and moved along it. Some places were blocked by the terrain, so Chen Zhao had to jump into the lava river again and walk through it. But overall, the road was quite spacious. Chen Zhao arrived at the lava lake. It was the one where he had met the phoenix. Even though he was flying above the lava lake, he could still feel the scorching heat waves. But now, even if lava was smeared on his face, it wouldn't hurt him at all. Not to mention that it was just a heat wave. However, if he soaked in lava, it would still consume a lot of immortal energy. Therefore, Chen Zhao didn't want to stay in the lava forever. Chen Zhao couldn't find any traces of the association members. He could only stroll around by himself. As for their current situation, Chen Zhao wasn't sure. Chen Zhao saw some caves around the lava lake. Some of the caves were spewing lava. Chen Zhao arrived at the entrance of one of the caves. He sensed that there were signs of life in the depths of the cave. It didn't matter if he was a member of the association or a monster from the underground. Chen Zhao's senses weren't as clear as the small world. However, this perception was similar to superhuman hearing. The immortal power greatly increased his bodily functions. From physical resistance to all kinds of resistances, to physical strength, vision, hearing, and reaction time were all improved. Chen Zhao really suspected that if he continued to evolve, he would become like Superman in the movies. In fact, many of Chen Zhao's abilities were almost superhuman. For example, if he used all things returned to one, his strength could reach 150,000 tons. If he used his full strength, he could even push the largest ship in the world. After walking for a few minutes, he suddenly heard footsteps in front of him. Chen Zhao immediately walked forward. Chen Zhao thought it was someone from the association. However, he didn't expect them to not be from the association. It was a girl. Bao, the daughter of the Porsche store owner? Chen Zhao was stunned. Bao also stared at the person who had suddenly appeared. This person wearing strange equipment. Because he was wearing a helmet, Bauer didn't recognize him. While Bauer was sizing him up, he was also sizing her up. The temperature here was at least 200 to 300 degrees. However, Bauer seemed to be very used to the temperature here. There was a red mark on her forehead, and there were also some red lines on her exposed skin. Bauer was holding a bough made from the branches of a mistletoe tree. He stared at Chen Zhao warily. "Who are you? Why are you here?" "I should be asking you that," Chen Zhao said. "Who are you? Why can you appear here without wearing a protective suit?" "A spiritualist?" She didn't seem to have any magical aura. Bauer didn't answer Chen Zhao's question either. Instead, she raised her bow, pulled back the string, and knocked an arrow at Chen Zhao. "Tell me, who are you?" Suddenly, Bauer's bowstring loosened without any warning. Chen Zhao was stunned. This girl actually dared to attack him? But he soon realized that Bauer's arrow was off by a lot. The arrow flew over Chen Zhao's head. When Chen Zhao turned around, he saw that it was a lizard covered in flames. The lizard was about 3 meters long. Its body was red with black spots. It looked like Abido's, but it was much smaller. At the moment, Abido's was already 9 meters long in his normal state. If he turned into a fire dragon, he would be around 12 meters long. Chen Zhao didn't think that he wouldn't notice the lizard, even with his strong senses. "I saved your life. Can you tell me who you are now?" Did that count as saving his life? Chen Zhao was speechless. Nevertheless, he still opened the visor of his helmet. "Hey, little girl, we meet again." "It's you." Seeing Chen Zhao's face, Bauer immediately raised her bow. "Why are you here? Are you with the dark elves too?" "Dark elves? What the hell? Were they the night elves in the city?" "I'm a researcher." "Researcher?" Bauer tilted her head and looked at Chen Zhao. "What do you study?" "Geology." "No wonder." Bauer's knowledge seemed to make her think that it was reasonable for a researcher to appear here. She didn't seem to notice Chen Zhao's armor. It was very abnormal. "What's with your equipment?" "Heat-resistant suit," Chen Zhao said. "Why aren't you afraid of high temperatures?" "Why should I tell you?" Bauer said in annoyance. "You better leave quickly. It's very dangerous here." "I'm not afraid of danger," Chen Zhao said calmly. "Scram. I won't protect you anymore." Bauer pretended to be fierce. Unfortunately, this didn't scare Chen Zhao. "What if I don't leave?" Chen Zhao asked nonchalantly. Bauer raised her bow again and pointed at him. "Then I'll kill you." "Are you scared?" "Yes." "Then scram." "I heard that this place is closer to hell. Will I go to hell faster after I die?" Bauer glanced at Chen Zhao. Thinking that he was crazy, she turned and left. On the other hand, Chen Zhao shamelessly followed behind her. Bauer took a few steps and turned around dissatisfied. "Why are you following me? Is this your home?" "What did you say?" Bauer raised her bow again. Chen Zhao immediately raised his hands. "I said that I need to go this way to leave. You can't leave the direction you came from. There's a lava lake there." "Then why did you come from there?" "Because I came here first. I saw that it was a dead end, so I turned back." Chapter 1563. Bauer didn't believe him. She walked in the direction Chen Zhao had come from for a few minutes, and indeed saw a huge lava lake. No matter how much she didn't believe him, she could only believe him. After all, even if she possessed a special bloodline, it was impossible for her to cross the magma lake. Bao and Bader's bloodline was very special. They were twins. They also had white elf and dark elf bloodlines. Of course, this also proved that white elves and dark elves were actually the same race. How did humans differentiate between species? Those that could mate and reproduce were the same species. For example, yellow, white, and black people could reproduce together and give birth to the next generation. So, no matter their skin color, they were actually the same species. Humans, monkeys, and chimpanzees couldn't reproduce. They were primates, but they weren't the same species. No matter how much white elves and dark elves looked down on each other and hated each other, it couldn't change this fact. Bao and Bader's mother, Undine, had the ice bloodline, but they'd both awakened the fire bloodline. In this hot environment, they wouldn't be hurt. Instead, they'd become stronger and stronger. So Bao was still wary of Chen Zhao, but it wasn't because she was afraid of him. It was because this was her home turf. Chen Zhao poked the red pattern on Bao's arm with his finger. The red pattern looked quite beautiful. This was probably why Bao wasn't afraid of the heat. "Don't touch me," Bao said fiercely. "I'll kill you." But no matter how she pretended to be fierce, it was hard to scare people. "Why did you come here?" Chen Zhao asked curiously. "None of your business." Bao glared at him. "Tell me about elves, and what's with the dark elves you mentioned just now?" "You don't need to know." Bao rejected his question. Just then, 3 fire lizards appeared before them. One of them was bigger than the other 2. It was about 8 meters long and had a muscular body. The fire lizard made Chen Zhao suspect that it might be related to the dragons. But they didn't have horns, and Chen Zhao didn't sense any dragon aura from them. Bao was not afraid at all. "You'd better stay away. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect you later." "No, I won't protect you at all." Bao corrected herself. "Your life and death have nothing to do with me anyway." "Who said it doesn't matter? Think about it. I'm a rich man, and I'm a big customer of your father's Porsche store. As long as I'm alive, I can spend more in your father's store. Your father earns more money, and then you can have more pocket money. Am I right?" Bao was stunned for a moment. She seemed to be seriously considering this question. However, before she could wrap her head around it, the 3 fire lizards had already charged over. Bao leaped high into the air. Her jump was at least 4 meters high. Her toes bounced off the rock wall and landed behind the salamander. Then, he pulled the bowstring in his hand to the fullest and released it. It accurately hit the head of a fire lizard. The piercing power of this arrow was extremely strong. Not only did it pierce through the fire salamander's head from behind, but it also stabbed into the rocks on the ground. The largest fire lizard charged straight at Chen Zhao. As soon as Chen Zhao released his aura, the biggest salamander immediately froze. Just then Bao's help arrived. "Watch out!" Bao yelled. She leaped onto the fire lizard's back, pulled out a dagger from her waist, and stabbed it heavily into the fire lizard's neck. The fire lizard struggled wildly, but Bao was extremely agile. The moment she succeeded, she jumped to the side and shot 2 more arrows, both hitting the 3rd fire lizard. In less than 2 minutes, she had killed all 3 fire lizards. The entire process was smooth and pleasing to the eye. Chen Zhao stepped over the fire lizard's corpse and pulled on Bao's clothes. Her clothes were very loose, and she had a belt made of the same material around her waist. If it were normal clothes, they would probably spontaneously combust in such a hot environment. However, Bao's clothes were still perfectly fine in such a high temperature. "What material are you made of? It's so hot." Bao slapped Chen Zhao's hand away in disgust. "Why are you like this? Don't touch it." Chen Zhao wanted to tear off a piece and study it. However, the material was much tougher than he'd imagined. If Chen Zhao tore it off forcefully, Bao's clothes would probably be torn off. "If you touch me again, I won't go easy on you." Bao looked at Chen Zhao as if he was a pervert. Bao didn't leave immediately. Instead, she started cutting off a piece of fire lizard meat. "Can this be eaten?" "Yes, but its meat is poisonous. Normal people will be poisoned if they eat it. Of course, it's not fatal." Bao glanced at Chen Zhao. But you don't have a choice now. If you don't want to die here, you better bring some. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. It's poisonous? Forget it then. Chen Zhao didn't reject the meat of magical creatures. However, he'd always been stubborn. Chen Zhao wouldn't eat it even if it was slightly poisonous. Suddenly, Bauer raised her bow and pointed at the tunnel ahead. Who is it? Come out. Bader jumped out from the tunnel ahead. Bauer, it's you. How come you're here too? Bader didn't expect to see Bauer here. Bader, you made it easy for me to find you. Then Bader looked at Chen Zhao. Bauer, who is he? The man who bought a car from Dad's shop last time, Bauer said. Him? How come he's here? He's a geologist. He came here for research and happened to run into him. Bauer, you're kidding, right? I've never heard of a geologist going into the Great Abyss. Bader was only an hour older than Bauer, but he was smarter than her. At least he could tell what was normal and what wasn't. Bader looked at Chen Zhao warily. Who exactly are you? Bauer glanced at Chen Zhao and said, I knew something was wrong with him. He wasn't even afraid of the fire lizard. Looks like I was right. Chen Zhao pursed his lips. This girl really knew how to say things after the fact. Fine, Chen Zhao said in a low voice, pretending to be mysterious. Actually, I'm an underground human. My ancestors and I have always lived underground. This is our home. We occasionally go to the surface and hide among humans. Bauer and Bader were both dazed. Underground humans? Do underground humans really exist in sci-fi? Is there an underground world? Chapter 1564. The two kids really believed Chen Zhao's bullshit. But Chen Zhao couldn't stop complaining. Because the two of them, the so-called elves, did not come out of fantasy stories. It wasn't strange for him to talk about the underground world in science fiction. Chen Zhao didn't plan on letting them believe him at all. But they really believed him. Chen Zhao didn't know if he should call them stupid or naive. Chen Zhao was used to lying. He just said it casually, but they actually believed him. You underground people. This was what they called Chen Zhao now. Are there a lot of underground people? Where's your underground world? Can you take us there? First, tell me about you elves. Why are you here? It's not the dark elves. It's all them, Bauer complained. Bauer complained. They want to find the enlightenment water in the cave. Water of enlightenment? What's that? Chen Zhao asked, confused. It's a treasure that can evolve the elven bloodline. Bauer. Bader immediately reminded her. Bader was usually careless, but his mind was clear. Where's the water of enlightenment? Chen Zhao asked shamelessly. Even though he knew it was their secret, Chen Zhao still wanted to know. Just from the name, one could tell that the water of enlightenment was good stuff. Suddenly a chill came from behind. Chen Zhao raised his arm and grabbed it. It was an arrow, and not an ordinary one at that. The moment Chen Zhao grabbed it, a bone-chilling coldness exploded from the arrow. Half of Chen Zhao's shoulder was instantly frozen. Chen Zhao turned around and saw Undine walk out from the corner. Mom. Bader and Bauer cried in surprise. Undine's expression was still cold. A cold aura surrounded her. Chen Zhao was surprised. These elves were really good at hiding their auras. As long as they weren't in his small world, he couldn't sense them at all. Undine looked at Chen Zhao coldly. Sir, it's embarrassing to lie to two kids. Chen Zhao grinned. She seemed to have heard what he'd said to the two kids earlier. So are you going to regain face for your children? The ice on Chen Zhao's shoulder suddenly shattered. He stretched his arm. Undine's pupils suddenly shrank. To be honest, she didn't want to have a conflict with him here. Because her attribute was destined to be restrained by the environment here. She had to use half of her strength to resist the heat. And Chen Zhao had hidden his strength very well. However, he was able to ignore his ice arrows and cold air, which meant that it would be very difficult for him to defeat him here. As for Bauer and Bader, they were strengthened in this environment. However, they were still not strong enough. Moreover, they didn't have enough experience. It was too dangerous to fight someone like Chen Zhao. Are you an enemy? Of course not, Chen Zhao said. I have nothing to do with you. Of course, I have nothing to do with your enemies either. Bader, Bauer, come here, Undine said. Bader and Bauer ran to Undine. They had thought that Undine was going to fight Chen Zhao. But Undine turned around and led them away. However, Chen Zhao shamelessly followed them. Undine raised her bow and pointed at Chen Zhao. Sir, what do you mean? Nothing, I'm just lost, Chen Zhao said matter-of-factly. I have no obligation to lead the way. Undine's tone and attitude were still as unapproachable as before. Unfortunately, Chen Zhao was shameless. No matter what, he was determined to follow Undine. Whether she was willing to lead or not, Chen Zhao wasn't going to leave. Then let's go our separate ways. Somewhat annoyed, Undine shot an arrow at Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao still easily caught the arrow. This time his entire body was frozen. But in the blink of an eye, the ice on him shattered. Undine was even more annoyed. What exactly do you want? Mom, should we fight him? Bao and Bader were both warmongers. Especially in this environment. The scorching heat seemed to ignite their fighting spirit, and the blood in their bodies. Undine's eyes flickered. She was thinking about the chances of winning if the three of them fought Chen Zhao. But after thinking for a while, she quietly gave up on the idea. Judging from Chen Zhao's current abilities, even if they won, they might not be able to escape unscathed. Whether it was Bao or Bader, Undine didn't want to see either. Let's go. In the end, Undine decided not to care about Chen Zhao following them. On the other hand, Chen Zhao walked beside Undine, as if they were familiar with each other. What abilities do you elves have? Was the ice arrow you shot just now your ability? Chen Zhao was a curious baby. He was always curious about the unknown. I don't feel any magic from you. How do you control the power of the elements? Annoyed, Undine ignored Chen Zhao's question. But Bao explained to Chen Zhao enthusiastically. We elves are naturally close to the elements, Bao said. We don't control the elements. We communicate with them. Bao, Undine scolded. Bao shrunk back and stuck out her tongue. Close to the elements. Communicate with the elements? Chen Zhao was even more curious. Should he catch an elf and study it? Just then, there was a sudden rumble in front of them. Was it an earthquake? Chen Zhao was confused. Undine suddenly jumped up. Bader followed closely behind. After jumping up, Bao immediately said to Chen Zhao, the surrounding elements tell us that there's lava flowing in our direction. As they spoke, the tumbling red current was already rushing toward them. Chen Zhao immediately jumped up and grabbed the rock wall. At the same time, Chen Zhao felt Undine's gaze. In that instant, Undine seemed to want to attack. But she gave up on the idea in the end. Undine, Bao and Bader jumped around on the rock wall as they advanced. Even Chen Zhao couldn't be as precise as them at every landing point. Even if it was a protrusion, they could grasp it fully. However, Chen Zhao was just pretending. He would advance the same way they advanced. Undine had been observing Chen Zhao in secret. She was a bit confused about how Chen Zhao did it. Compared to them, Chen Zhao's movements were rougher. Normally, he would have fallen into the lava long ago. Chapter 1565. The four jumped left and right and finally landed on a platform. There was a tunnel in the rock mass behind the platform. When Chen Zhao landed on the platform, he realized that the tunnel was man-made. The entrance was very spacious, and it looked like a big canyon. The lava river below illuminated the place very brightly. Undine glanced at Chen Zhao. She was very confused by his actions. Chen Zhao's actions had violated the laws of physics many times. Undine could roughly tell that Chen Zhao was an enhancer spiritualist. But there were differences even among enhancers. For example, an elite. More accurately, he was also an enhancer. Chen Zhao was also recalling what Undine and her mother and daughter had done just now. Even though Chen Zhao's physique was much better than theirs, he still couldn't copy their actions. Their actions were all calculated by human kinematics and footholds like computers. Even if Chen Zhao imitated most of the movements and footholds, he was just copying a tiger and a cat. He could learn the surface but not the essence. Of course, this was an ability unique to elves. Chen Zhao wouldn't be discouraged, even if he couldn't learn it. What could he do about their racial talents? Suddenly, there was a sound from the tunnel. There was a living thing in the tunnel. Just then Chen Zhao pulled Bao violently. Before Bao could scold Chen Zhao, something flew past where she'd been standing. After missing its target, it flew more than 10 meters away. Then there was a huge sound. It was like the power of a grenade explosion. In the darkness of the tunnel, there was some red light. The red light was probably the eye of some creature. It's the abyss nest maker. Undine's expression was serious. At the same time, she couldn't help but glance at Chen Zhao. Clearly, she was worried that Chen Zhao would hurt her son and daughter. But Chen Zhao's actions just now had won her trust. Help me protect Bader and Bao. I'll go deal with that abyss nest maker. Go in peace. I'll take care of your daughter. Chen Zhao looked at Undine seriously. Angered, Undine snorted coldly. Don't think I don't know what you mean in the East. Actually, I didn't mean anything else. Don't think too highly of yourself. Just then the abyss nest maker crawled out of the tunnel. It was a creature that looked like a spider. Of course, it was 10,000 times bigger than a spider. It was about 5 meters tall, and had 6 furry limbs. However, from its head to its tail, it was covered with red eyes. Let's just call them eyes. And there were probably hundreds of them. It had a round and bulging belly, a raised tail, and there was even a hole at the end of it. Its mouth opened like a flower petal. So ugly. Chen Zhao couldn't help but complain. Both Bader and Bao agreed with this. Undine's expression was somewhat solemn as she raised her wooden bow. But before she could fire an arrow, the abyss nest builder swung its tail, and a red orb shot at her. Bang! Undine quickly dodged the explosion and fired the arrow at the abyssal hive. The arrow was about to hit the abyssal nest builder. However, the abyssal nest builder opened its mouth and spat out lava, which hit the arrow squarely. Undine cursed inwardly. Damn it! The abyssal nest dwellers were the most troublesome underground creatures for the elves. Their reactions were very fast, and the eyes on their backs were all compound eyes. Their compound eyes could capture any attack. They were even sharper than the fastest human cameras. Undine leaped from the rock wall to the sky above the abyssal nest builder. One had to admit that Undine's movements were very beautiful. Her fighting style was completely different from Chen Zhao's. When Chen Zhao attacked, most of the time, he was straightforward. However, the elf's fighting was like an art or a dance. Undine shot an arrow at the abyssal nest builder with her head down and feet up. The abyssal nest builder also bounced back, dodging Undine's arrow. At the same time, it hung on the wall. The abyssal nest builder moved up and down the wall. Chen Zhao started shooting at Undine. He realized that the coldness around Undine was getting weaker and weaker. Undine's attacks weren't as frequent either. Thinking about it, Chen Zhao knew the problem Undine was facing. He secretly used needle threading. An invisible thread wrapped around one of the abyssal nest builder's legs. Shocked, the abyssal nest builder tried to break free from the invisible thread. However, the tenacity of this thread far surpassed any metal. Undine's attack landed on the abyssal nest builder. The abyssal nest builder wanted to dodge, but one of its legs was tied up. It couldn't dodge Undine's attack no matter what. The arrow pierced through the abyssal nest builder's back. The abyssal nest builder's back was instantly frozen. Then, the other 5 limbs lost their grip too. It fell from the wall into the lava. Boom, 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 Undine panted, her eyes revealing a trace of doubt. What was going on? Her attack just now was just a probing attack. The abyssal nest builder couldn't be hit at all. But why was the abyssal hive hit? It didn't make sense. The abyssal nest builder could totally dodge it. Undine recalled the abyssal nest builder's movements. It seemed to pause for a moment. Undine looked at Chen Zhao. You attacked just now. What? Chen Zhao pretended not to know. Nothing. Undine didn't ask. She didn't sense or see Chen Zhao's movements. But she felt that Chen Zhao had definitely attacked. Otherwise, she wouldn't have won so easily. Undine led the way into the tunnel. She'd used up a lot of power just now. In this environment, it was very difficult for her to recover through the elements. The surrounding elements were too restless. It wasn't suitable for her to recover at all. Sir, since you're a member of our team, shouldn't you show your value? Undine's power was greatly reduced now, but she didn't want her son and daughter to fight. After all, everything here was very dangerous, so she turned her attention to Chen Zhao. Tell me about elves, Chen Zhao said. What do you want to know about us? Everything. I'm quite interested in you guys. Chen Zhao didn't hide his intentions at all. And what's the water of enlightenment? Agonades, Undine said. That's our real name. It means son of nature. Elves are what humans call us. It comes from movies, games, and novels. I think Son of Element is more suitable for you. Chapter 1566. Undine shrugged. Armendadir is the elemental sun in Elvish. The water of enlightenment is Armendadir's blood. Undine paused for a moment before continuing. However, Armand Didier is the symbol of depravity. He is sinister, cunning, evil, and bloodthirsty. The dark elves were tempted by Armand Didier and drank his blood, thus becoming depraved. Chen Zhao frowned. Undine's words seemed to contradict herself. You said that the water of enlightenment can make elves evolve. And then you said that Armendadir's blood is the water of enlightenment. Then you said that the dark elves drank Armendadir's blood and became depraved. So did the dark elves evolve or depraved? Chen Zhao raised his suspicions. Or maybe your ancestors were jealous of the dark elves. The dark elves evolved, but the other elves didn't. So they purposely divided and slandered the dark elves? Chen Zhao felt that this was possible. Wasn't this a classic case of envy, jealousy, and hatred? Of course it's not that simple, Undine said unhurriedly. At that time, there were no dark elves. At that time, the elves were still a whole. Avendadir disguised himself as a sage and came to the elf clan. He used our kindness and trust to trick the entire elf clan into drinking his blood. It wasn't just the dark elves who drank it, but the entire elf clan. Undine slowly said. Avendadir descended 3,000 years ago. At that time there were no dark elves. And then, later, some of them were tempted by Armendadir's blood and became his slaves. From then on, the elves split into the white elves and the dark elves. Under Armendadir's leadership, the dark elves started a war against the white elves. Who won in the end? Chen Zhao asked. Of course we won. Light triumphed over darkness, justice triumphed over evil, and Amanda Didier was sealed by us. Undine's tone was still cold, but there was a tinge of pride in her tone. Chen Zhao didn't agree with the so-called depravity. People's thoughts might change, but their personalities wouldn't. For example, the source of the depravity. He also had the ability to control others. But that was control, not depravity. Control and depravity were different. If there was really someone in the world who could make someone depraved, then that person could definitely rule the world. Take God for example. In any mythological system, God was the most powerful existence. But could God change a person's thinking? If God could change everyone's mind, that way, he could directly turn all the humans in the world into his believers. Then God would not need to establish a religion. Of course, Chen Zhao wouldn't argue with Undine. After all, this story had been passed down for 3,000 years. It was clearly impossible for Chen Zhao to overturn 3,000 years of history with his own knowledge. So this is where Armand Didier was sealed. Yes, the ancestor of the White Elves sealed Armand Didier here. The Dark Elves want to release Armendadir? The Dark Elves aren't stupid. If they release Amanda, they will only become his slaves again. The Dark Elves only want Amanda's blood, which is the water of enlightenment. I told you, I just want the water of enlightenment. I have no intention of releasing Amandadir, Lila Gavik said angrily. Do you think I'll believe you? Moskopool stared coldly at Lila Gavik. His eyes were filled with distrust and hatred. He knew Lila Gavik too well, a cunning old fox. Just like his master, Amandadir, they were both sinister and dangerous. Releasing Amandadir won't do me any good. I won't believe you. Lila Gavik sneered at Moskopool. You also want the water of enlightenment, right? You hypocrite. You keep saying that you're going to stop me. But ever since you met me, you've never really stopped me. Clearly you want the water of enlightenment too. It's better than falling into your hands, Moskopool said calmly. Aren't you afraid of falling? Lila Gavi smiled strangely. I wonder if it would be interesting if a white elf like you, who thinks highly of yourself and is proud of your bloodline, degenerates into a bastard like me. Do you think this is the first time we white elves have come here? Moskopool sneered. Every generation, white elves will come here to extract the water of enlightenment. As the descendants of white elves, we won't be tainted by Amandadir's fallen will. Despicable. No wonder you white elves could awaken so many high-level bloodlines after so many generations. You've been hiding it all along. Lila Gavik was both angry and jealous. After all, the Dark Elves had spent hundreds of years just to find the entrance to the cave. Dark Elves didn't have a high-grade bloodline in every generation. For example, when Lila Gavik had taken over as the leader of the Dark Elves, he had only been an ordinary Dark Elf. The previous Dark Elven patriarch was also a member of the Dark Elven race, with an ordinary bloodline. But the White Elves had always controlled this place. If they wanted to, they could come here at any time. Moreover, the White Elves had never lacked high-level bloodlines. Every generation had 3 or 4 High Elves. Lila Gavik and the other Dark Elves did not understand why. They thought it was because their bloodlines were purer. Only now did they understand that it wasn't because of the so-called bloodline. It was because they had been embezzling. They were both watchers and thieves. They claimed that Amanda Deer's blood would corrupt the elves. But they themselves had never stopped using Armand Dill's blood. Was there anyone more shameless than them in this world? Lila Gavik had never believed that story either. Although the story was also spread among the Dark Elves, Lila Gavik believed that his will would not be tainted by the water of enlightenment. Lila Gavik looked at Moskopool. A smile appeared on his face. Have you used the water of enlightenment before? Moskopool looked at Lila Gavik. You know, the water of enlightenment can only be used once. It won't work the second time. I thought a piece of trash like you awakened a high-level bloodline with the water of enlightenment. You're not the only genius in this world. Please remember this book's domain name. 9 Heavens Godly Emperor mobile version. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.